Welcome. I'm Magnus, and I bring you horror stories to help you relax, or maybe to keep you up at night. Tell us where you're from. Are there spooky forests nearby? If you're a fan of scary stories, subscribe and drop a like. Get cozy, and let's begin. My name is Ethan Mercer, 32 years old, and I live in Cincinnati where I work as a wildlife photographer. Photography started as a hobby during college, but somehow turned into a career that I never expected. The isolation of nature has always called to me, a stark contrast to the crowded streets of Cincinnati, where car horns and construction noise blend into a constant urban soundtrack. That's why when my colleague Dylan mentioned an abandoned fire lookout tower in Hocking Hill State Park, I immediately started planning a solo trip. It's technically off-limits, Dylan had said, showing me coordinates on his phone. The Forestry Service condemned it years ago, but hikers say it's still standing. Perfect for those atmospheric shots you're always chasing. He wasn't wrong. My Instagram followers had been clamoring for more of my Haunting Wilderness series, and an abandoned lookout tower could be exactly what I needed to boost my following. The drive from Cincinnati to Hocking Hills took nearly 3 hours. I watched as dense urban sprawl gradually transformed into rolling countryside, and finally the thick deciduous forest that Ohio is known for. I'd packed my Jeep Cherokee with enough supplies for 5 days, my camera equipment, portable power banks, freeze-dried meals, and camping gear. The Forestry Service maps showed the tower was about 2 miles from the nearest official trail, which meant carrying everything on my back for the final stretch. Fall had painted the forest in brilliant reds and golds, and the afternoon light filtered through the canopy as I parked at a remote trailhead. Only 2 other cars were there, a good sign that I'd have plenty of privacy. I shouldered my oversized backpack and locked the Jeep, dropping the keys into my front pocket. The familiar weight of my camera around my neck was comforting as I set off, following the coordinates Dylan had shared. The official trail was well maintained, but after about a mile, I veered west into unmarked territory. The undergrowth became thicker, grabbing at my ankles and occasionally forcing me to backtrack around dense patches of thorny brambles. My GPS showed I was getting closer, but the tower remained hidden behind the increasingly steep terrain. The forest had grown quieter the further I ventured from the trail, with only the occasional bird call piercing the silence. When I finally spotted the tower through a break in the trees, I felt a strange mix of excitement and unease. It stood on a rocky outcropping, at least 60 feet tall, its metal frame rusted but seemingly intact. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across its skeletal structure, making it look like some prehistoric creature rising from the earth. I snapped several photos immediately, knowing the lighting was perfect. This would be worth every bit of the difficult hike. As I approached the base of the tower, I noticed warning signs, faded but still legible. Danger, structure unsafe. Do not climb. The bottom 10 feet of the ladder had been removed, presumably to discourage people like me from accessing it. But I'd come prepared with a collapsible ladder of my own, lightweight aluminum that I'd strapped to my pack specifically for this purpose. Setting it up against the tower's frame, I tested its stability before beginning my ascent with my pack. The metal groaned under my weight, and loose rust flakes showered down as I climbed past the first landing. My heart pounded, partly from exertion, but mostly from the thrill of doing something I definitely shouldn't be doing. The climb took nearly 20 minutes, each platform requiring careful testing before I trusted it with my full weight. By the time I reached the observation cabin at the top, the sun was beginning to set, casting an orange glow across the endless canopy of trees. The cabin itself was in better shape than I'd expected, about 12 feet square with windows on all sides, most of them still intact. The door hung askew on one hinge, and I had to shoulder it open. Inside, dead leaves had collected in the corners, and graffiti covered most surfaces, but the floor seemed solid. I set down my pack and walked carefully around the perimeter, testing each board before committing my weight. This would be home for the next few days, a perfect vantage point for capturing the wilderness in all its raw beauty. I couldn't have asked for a better spot. If only I'd known what waited for me in this forgotten place, I would have deleted those coordinates and never set foot in these woods. I woke to the sound of rain drumming against the metal roof of the lookout cabin. My first night had been fitful, The sleeping bag did little to cushion the hard wooden floor, and the wind had picked up around midnight, causing the entire tower to sway in a deeply disturbing way. Still, I managed to get some decent shots of the sunrise breaking through storm clouds before the rain started. By midday, I realized I'd made my first mistake. The water I'd packed wasn't going to last 5 days, especially in this heat. I'd planned to collect rainwater as backup, but the collection system I'd improvised using my tarp wasn't working well. Water dripped through in only a trickle, and what did collect had a rusty tinge that made me hesitant to drink it without proper filtration. I checked my map and found a stream about half a mile east where I could refill my bottles with my portable filter. The descent from the tower was even more nerve-wracking than the climb up. The rain had made the metal rungs slippery, and twice my foot nearly missed a step that would have sent me plummeting. When I finally reached the ground, my hands were shaking from the strain of maintaining such a death grip on the ladder. The forest floor was soggy, fallen leaves plastering themselves to my boots as I trudged toward the stream. I was about halfway there when I noticed something odd. A tent, dark green and almost hidden among the trees, about 50 yards off my route. I hadn't expected to find anyone else this far off trail. Curious, I changed direction to check it out. As I got closer, I could see that something was wrong. The tent had been slashed open from side to side, and camping gear was scattered all around as if someone had left in a tremendous hurry. A chill ran down my spine despite the humid air. "Hello," I called out, scanning the surrounding trees. "Anyone here?" Only silence answered me. I approached cautiously, camera ready to document the scene. Inside the torn tent, I found a sleeping bag, also slashed, and a backpack that had been emptied forcefully. No blood, I noted with relief, but no sign of the camper either. Maybe a bear had raided the site, but bears don't typically slash tents so precisely, and there were no claw marks on the food containers. The rain intensified as I examined the area around the tent. That's when I found the footprints, definitely human, but oddly spaced, as if the person had been running erratically. They led deeper into the forest, away from any trail. I hesitated, looking back in the direction of my tower. I should probably report this when I got back to civilization, but was it my responsibility to follow these tracks now? A crack of thunder decided for me. I needed to get water and get back before the storm worsened. At the stream, I quickly filled my bottles and applied my filtration system. As I worked, a sound caught my attention, movement in the underbrush across the water. I peered through the rain, but couldn't make out anything specific. Just as I was about to dismiss it as wildlife, I caught a glimpse of something pale moving between the trees. A person? I stood up quickly. "Hey, do you need help?" I shouted, but my voice was swallowed by another roll of thunder. Whatever I'd seen was gone. With my bottles filled, I headed back toward the tower, deliberately avoiding the ransacked campsite. The journey back seemed longer, the forest somehow more dense and watchful. Several times I thought I heard footsteps behind me, but whenever I turned, there was nothing but rain-soaked vegetation. By the time I reached the base of the tower, my unease had grown into genuine anxiety. I secured my collapsible ladder and began the climb, constantly looking over my shoulder. The higher I went, the safer I felt, until I finally reached the cabin again. I closed the crooked door as best I could, suddenly grateful for the elevation that separated me from whatever might be moving through the woods below. As night fell, I huddled in my sleeping bag, listening to the storm rage outside and the occasional creak of the tower adjusting to gusts of wind. Every noise made me jump. Every shadow seemed to shift in the flashes of lightning. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that the empty campsite had just spooked me. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something horrible had happened there, and that whatever caused it might still be out there in the darkness. Day 3 dawned clear and bright, the storm having blown itself out overnight. I'd slept poorly, haunted by dreams of being chased through endless woods by something I couldn't quite see. Exhausted but determined to make the most of the good weather, I set up my tripod to capture the morning mist rising from the forest floor. Through my telephoto lens, the landscape was breathtaking. Layers of trees stretching to the horizon, patches of fog floating between them like ghostly rivers. I was adjusting my focus when something caught my eye, a splash of unnatural color against the green and brown palette of the forest. Zooming in, I realized it was a person, a woman in a red jacket, moving through the trees about a quarter mile from the tower. She seemed to be in a hurry, her head constantly turning as if checking behind her. I watched, intrigued. Was she a park ranger? Another photographer? Then she stopped abruptly and looked up, directly at the tower. Even from this distance, I could sense her surprise at seeing someone in the condemned structure. She changed direction immediately, heading straight for the tower. I felt a surge of relief. Human contact after the unsettling discoveries of yesterday. I waved, and to my surprise, she broke into a run. Something about her desperate pace sent a chill through me. I grabbed my walkie-talkie on impulse. I brought it even though I knew there was no park service frequency this far out, and tried a general call. Nothing but static answered. By the time the woman reached the base of the tower, she was gasping for breath. "Help me up," she shouted, her voice tight with panic. "Please, I need to get up there now." I hesitated only briefly before lowering my collapsible ladder. She scrambled up with surprising agility, and I helped her through the cabin door. Her name was Lena Novak. She explained between desperate gulps of air, a geology student from Ohio State who'd been collecting soil samples in the area. "Something's out there," she said, her eyes wild as she peered through the windows. "It's been stalking me since yesterday. I thought it was a bear at first, but..." She shook her head, pushing sweat-dampened hair from her face. "It took my research partner, Malik. Just took him. I heard him screaming, and then nothing." Her voice broke on the last word. I told her about the slashed tent I'd found, and her face went pale. "That was our base camp," she whispered. "We had a second site closer to the northwest ridge where we were working. Malik stayed there while I went to get more supplies. When I got back, everything was destroyed and he was gone." Tears welled in her eyes. "I've been running ever since." We spent the next hour comparing notes, trying to make sense of what was happening. Lena hadn't seen whatever had taken Malik clearly, just a dark shape moving with unnatural speed through the trees. As she talked, I couldn't help noticing how her gaze kept darting to the windows, checking and rechecking the surrounding forest. Her fear was contagious, and I found myself doing the same, scrutinizing every shadow between the trees. Around noon, a new sound emerged from the forest, a low, reverberating moan that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Lena froze mid-sentence, her eyes widening in terror. "That's it," she whispered. "That's what I heard before Malik disappeared." We crept to the windows, scanning the woods below. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just sun-dappled trees swaying gently in the breeze. Then Lena grabbed my arm, her fingernails digging painfully into my skin. "There," she hissed, pointing southeast. I followed her gesture and felt my blood turn to ice. Something was moving between the trees, something that didn't move like any animal I'd ever seen. It was roughly humanoid but too tall, too thin, its limbs bending at impossible angles as it weaved through the undergrowth. The details were hard to make out at this distance, but what I could see was enough to send waves of primal terror through my body. It stopped suddenly, and though I couldn't see a face, I knew with absolute certainty that it was looking up at us. Lena made a small, strangled sound beside me. The creature below tilted its head at an unnatural angle, as if curious about the noise. Then it began to move again, this time with purpose, straight toward the tower. "It's coming," Lena whispered, backing away from the window. "Oh God, it's coming for us." I fumbled for my camera, some irrational part of me needing to document what I was seeing, but my hands were shaking too badly to operate the controls. The creature reached the base of the tower with frightening speed. We heard the metal structure groan, followed by a rhythmic clanging that could only be something climbing the frame. Lena and I retreated to the center of the cabin, standing back to back as the sounds of ascent grew louder. The door I'd so carelessly left hanging on its broken hinge now seemed like a fatal oversight. We had nowhere to run, nowhere to hide. 60 feet above the ground, the lookout tower had transformed from sanctuary to trap. And as the clanging grew louder and something began to scratch at the door, I realized with horror that we were about to come face to face with whatever nightmare had been hunting in these woods. The scratching at the door intensified, a frantic scrabbling that sent with splinters flying into the cabin. Lena and I pressed ourselves against the far wall, our eyes fixed on the increasingly damaged door. My mind raced for options. We had no weapons beyond my hunting knife, and jumping from this height would be suicide. The tower itself began to sway more violently, as if whatever was outside was deliberately testing its structural integrity. The hatch, Lena suddenly gasped, pointing to the ceiling. I'd overlooked it completely, a small access panel that presumably led to the roof. Without waiting for my response, she dragged a broken chair beneath it and climbed up, pushing against the hatch with trembling hands. It gave way with a protesting creak, and daylight flooded into the cabin. Just as Lena pulled herself through the opening, the door finally splintered inward. I couldn't process what I was seeing, couldn't make my brain accept the impossibly elongated limbs, the gray skin stretched too tight over a frame that should not have been able to support itself, the face that was almost human but distorted in ways that made my stomach heave. It filled the doorway completely, its head brushing against the ceiling as it folded itself into the cabin. The smell hit me then, like rotting vegetation and something metallic, blood perhaps. "Ethan now," Lena screamed from above, snapping me out of my paralysis. I lunged for the chair and scrambled up, her hands grabbing my wrists to help pull me through the hatch. Behind me, the creature made a sound, a horrible wet clicking that might have been an attempt at speech. I kicked wildly as something cold and rough wrapped around my ankle, nearly dragging me back down. Lena's grip tightened, and with a final desperate heave, I tumbled onto the metal roof of the tower. We had seconds at most. The roof was essentially a small platform surrounded by a low railing, with the rusty remains of weather monitoring equipment bolted to one corner. Lena was already moving, pulling something from her pack, a flare gun. Forestry Service requires all research teams to carry one, she explained rapidly, loading a bright red cartridge. It won't stop that thing, but it might distract it long enough for us to. The hatch exploded upward, the metal panel flying completely off the roof and disappearing into the forest below. Lena fired immediately, the flare striking the creature directly in the center of what might have been its chest. It recoiled with an unearthly shriek that made my ears ring, its body contorting in ways that defied anatomy as the phosphorus burned into its flesh. The smell of burning meat added to the nauseating stench. "Run!" Lena shouted, pointing to the maintenance ladder bolted to the exterior of the tower. It led not up, but down, a narrow metal rungs descending the outside of the structure to the ground. Without hesitation, I swung myself over the railing and onto the ladder, nearly losing my grip on the rain-slick metal. Lena followed right behind me, the creature's enraged howls spurring us to descend faster than was safe. The ladder creaked ominously under our combined weight. About halfway down, I heard a metallic snap above us, and the entire section of ladder swayed sickeningly away from the tower. "It's breaking," I yelled to Lena. "We need to jump." We were still at least 30 feet from the ground, a dangerous height, but potentially survivable if we landed right. Below us, the forest floor was relatively clear of rocks, though the undergrowth might hide other hazards. The decision was made for us when another section of ladder tore free with a screech of protesting metal. We fell in a tangle of limbs and rungs, the world spinning around us. I had just enough presence of mind to try to roll with the impact, but pain still exploded through my left side as I hit the ground. Beside me, Lena cried out, a sharp, cut-off sound that told me she'd fared worse than I had. Forcing myself to my hands and knees, I crawled to where she lay. Her leg was bent at a sickening angle, clearly broken. Above us, the creature had emerged onto what remained of the exterior ladder, its body moving with that same impossible fluidity as it began to descend what was left of our escape route. "Leave me," Lena gasped, pushing weakly at my shoulders. "Run, damn it." Instead, I hoisted her up, ignoring her cries of pain and my own protesting ribs. With her arm around my shoulders, we staggered into the trees, moving as fast as her injury would allow. I had no destination in mind beyond away. Away from the tower, away from the creature, away from the nightmare our peaceful camping trip had become. Behind us, the sound of metal breaking told me the creature had either fallen or dismantled more of the tower in its pursuit. We stumbled through the forest, Lena growing heavier against me with every step. I knew we couldn't outrun it, not with her injury, not even if we were both at full strength. It moved too quickly, knew the terrain too well. Our only hope was to find somewhere to hide. Ahead, the land sloped downward toward what looked like a small ravine. At the bottom, partially hidden by fallen logs and years of forest debris, I spotted the dark mouth of what might be a cave or crevice in the rock face. Just a little farther, I urged Lena, who had grown alarmingly quiet. Her face was ashen, her breathing shallow, shock setting in from the pain and trauma. The ravine was steep, and our descent was more of a controlled fall, with me doing my best to cushion Lena from further injury. Behind us, the creature's moaning calls seemed to be growing closer. We reached the crevice, not quite a cave, but a narrow opening where water had eroded the rock face, creating a space just large enough for two people to squeeze into. I maneuvered Lena in first, then wedged myself beside her, pulling branches and forest debris across the opening to conceal us. The space was tight, the rock cold against our backs. In the dim light filtering through our makeshift camouflage, I could see blood soaking through Lena's jeans where the bone had broken through the skin. She needed medical attention urgently. My phone had no signal, my walkie-talkie only static. We were entirely on our own. Time stretched endlessly as we huddled in our hiding place. Minutes might have been hours, I couldn't tell anymore. Lena drifted in and out of consciousness beside me, her breathing growing more labored. Outside, the forest had gone eerily silent. No birds, no rustling of small animals, as if every living thing had fled the area. And then we heard it. The slow, deliberate sounds of something large moving down the ravine slope, disturbing stones and snapping twigs. It was hunting us, methodically sweeping the area. I held my breath, one hand pressed to Lena's mouth to stifle any sounds of pain she might make. The darkness that had seemed like salvation now felt like a tomb. Dawn broke with agonizing slowness, pale light filtering through the branches covering our hiding place. Lena had fallen into a fitful unconsciousness hours ago, her skin burning with fever despite the cold night air. I'd used strips torn from my shirt to bandage her leg as best I could, but infection had clearly set in. My own injuries seemed insignificant by comparison, bruised ribs and a sprained wrist that throbbed in time with my heartbeat. We'd made it through the night somehow. The creature had prowled around our hiding spot for hours, occasionally emitting that bone-chilling moan that seemed to reverberate through the rock itself. Twice it had come so close that I could hear its labored breathing, smell its putrid odor. Each time, it had eventually moved on, continuing its search elsewhere. I had no illusions that it had given up. It was simply expanding its hunting area. With the coming of daylight, I faced an impossible decision. Lena needed immediate medical help I couldn't provide in this crevice. But moving meant exposing ourselves, potentially revealing our location to the creature that was undoubtedly still searching for us. I checked my phone again, still no signal. The walkie-talkie produced nothing but static when I tried all channels. I was down to one bottle of water, which I'd been using sparingly to keep Lena hydrated and clean her wound. "We have to move," I whispered to myself, gently shaking Lena awake. Her eyes, when they finally opened, were glazed with pain and fever. "I'm going to get you out of here," I promised, though I had no idea how I would keep that promise. She nodded weakly, too exhausted to speak. I peered through our camouflage, scanning what I could see of the forest. Nothing moved except the leaves stirring in the morning breeze. Carefully, I removed the branches covering our hiding place and eased myself out first, ready to dive back in at the first sign of danger. The ravine was quiet, dappled with early morning light. I helped Lena out next, wincing at her barely suppressed cries of pain. Once again, I supported her weight as we began to move, this time heading downslope where the ravine widened. Water often meant trails, and trails meant potential rescue. We'd made it perhaps a quarter mile when Lena suddenly stiffened against me. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, her voice hardly more than a breath. I stopped, listening intently. At first, I heard nothing unusual, just the normal sounds of a forest waking up. Then it came to me, voices. Human voices, distant but distinct, calling out what sounded like names. A search party, I realized aloud, hope surging through me. They're looking for us, or at least for you and Malik. Without thinking, I opened my mouth to shout for help, but Lena's hand clamped over my lips with surprising strength. "No," she hissed. "It'll hear you too." The fear in her eyes was absolute. She was right, of course. The creature had demonstrated an uncanny ability to locate sound. Calling for help might bring rescue, but it would definitely bring our pursuer. We faced a terrible dilemma. Continue our slow, painful progress and hope we reached help before Lena's condition deteriorated further, or call out and risk bringing death down upon not only ourselves, but potentially our would-be rescuers as well. In the end, the decision was made for us. A distant, familiar moaning echoed through the trees. The creature had heard the search party too and was already moving in their direction. "We have to warn them," I said, my mind racing. The search party sounded like it was coming from the east, moving parallel to the ravine about half a mile away. If we could intercept them before the creature did. With renewed urgency, I helped Lena up the eastern slope of the ravine. Every step was agony for her, but she didn't complain, her jaw set in grim determination. We crested the ridge just in time to see a group of 5 people in Forestry Service uniforms moving through the trees about 200 yards away. They were calling out regularly. Malik, Lena, completely unaware of the danger they were in. And there, moving through the undergrowth with that same unnatural speed and fluidity, was the creature flanking the search party from the north. It was going to cut them off, ambush them from behind. Without another thought, I grabbed a rock and hurled it as far as I could in the opposite direction from both the search party and the creature. It struck a tree with a satisfying crack that echoed through the forest. The search party turned toward the sound, but so did the creature, its elongated form visible through the trees as it paused, seemingly confused by this new development. I threw another rock, then another, creating a trail of noise leading away from both the searchers and us. The creature followed the sounds, its curiosity or hunting instinct momentarily overriding its pursuit of the larger group. It was our chance. "Stay here," I told Lena, helping her sit against a tree where she'd be visible to the search party. "I'm going to bring them to you." "Ethan, don't," she pleaded, gripping my hand. "It's too dangerous. I'll be right back with help," I promised, squeezing her fingers before pulling away. I moved through the forest as quietly as I could, circling wide to approach the search party from a direction the creature wasn't watching. When I was close enough, I called out softly, "Hey, over here." 5 faces turned toward me, expressions shifting from surprise to concern as they took in my battered appearance. "Are you lost too?" a woman with a deputy sheriff's badge asked, approaching cautiously. "No, I mean, yes, but that's not important," I stammered. "I found Lena Novak. She's injured badly, but there's something else out here, something dangerous. It took her partner Malik, and it's been hunting us. It's close by. We need to get Lena and get out of here right now." I saw skepticism in their faces. Of course they wouldn't believe such a wild story. But the leader, an older man with a Forestry Service patch, nodded grimly. "We found what was left of their camp," he said quietly, "and other things. Where is she?" I led them quickly to where I'd left Lena, relief flooding through me when I saw she was still there, still conscious. 2 of the search party members immediately went to her, one pulling out a first aid kit while the other radioed for emergency extraction. We found Lena Novak. Adult female, compound fracture of the right tibia, signs of infection, possible shock. Requesting immediate medevac at the eastern clearing. Everything was happening quickly now. Lena's leg properly splinted, plans made for evacuation. I found myself standing slightly apart, scanning the surrounding forest nervously. The creature hadn't returned yet, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, watching, waiting. As if reading my thoughts, the Forestry Service man approached me. "We found some. Remains about a mile northwest of here," he said quietly, ensuring none of the others could hear. "Not enough to identify, but definitely human. There were marks on the bones. Not like any animal I've ever seen." He studied my face. "You really saw something out there, didn't you?" I nodded, unable to find words to describe the horror of what we'd encountered. The man looked back at the forest, his hand unconsciously moving to rest on his sidearm. "We need to get everyone out of here," he said firmly. "Whatever it is, we're not equipped to deal with it. I'm calling in a full evacuation of the area." Relief washed over me so powerfully that my knees nearly buckled. We were going to make it out. The nightmare was ending. As the group began to move, carrying Lena on an improvised stretcher, I fell into step beside them, eager to put as much distance as possible between us and the abandoned fire tower. We were maybe halfway to the evacuation point when one of the deputies at the rear of our group suddenly cried out. I turned just in time to see him being dragged into the underbrush with impossible speed, his scream cut off as abruptly as it had begun. Chaos erupted. Shouting, running, the terrible moaning sound that had haunted my nightmares now horrifyingly close. "Run!" the forestry serviceman shouted, drawing his weapon and firing blindly into the trees where the deputy had disappeared. "Get to the clearing." The remaining members of the party broke into a desperate sprint, the two carrying Lena's stretcher moving as fast as they could while maintaining their grip. I ran alongside them, my earlier injuries forgotten in the surge of adrenaline. Behind us, gunshots rang out, followed by a scream that couldn't have come from a human throat, a sound of rage and pain that made the hair on my neck stand on end. The forestry serviceman was buying us time, but at what cost? We reached the clearing to find a helicopter already descending, its rotors whipping the grass into a frenzy. The medical team rushed forward to take Lena, loading her quickly into the aircraft. "Where's Ranger Hodge?" one of the pilots shouted over the roar of the engine. No one answered. No one had to. The grim expressions told the whole story. The pilot nodded tersely. "We can take one more," he called, gesturing to the nearly full helicopter. The remaining search party members looked at each other, then at me. "You," said the deputy who had radioed for help. "You saved her life. Go." Before I could protest, I was being pushed toward the helicopter, handed in by strong arms that didn't give me a choice in the matter. The last thing I saw as we lifted off was the deputy and his remaining colleague heading back into the forest, weapons drawn, to look for their missing companions. The helicopter banked sharply, giving me one final view of the Hocking Hills forest stretching out below us. Somewhere in that vast green expanse was the abandoned fire lookout tower, now a monument to horrors I couldn't begin to comprehend. Lena lay unconscious on a stretcher beside me, and for already in her arm as the medical team worked to stabilize her. She would survive, I was told later, though she would never walk without a limp again. As for me, I deleted every photograph I'd taken during those 3 terrible days. I gave my statement to authorities, endured their skepticism, and eventually their grudging acceptance when the search for the missing forestry service members turned up only more unidentifiable remains with the same strange markings. The official report cited an unknown predator, possibly a bear with rabies or some other condition that made it abnormally aggressive. I knew better, but I stopped trying to convince anyone. Some truths are too horrifying to be believed. I've never gone camping again. I sold my photography equipment and took a job editing for a nature magazine, work that keeps me safely behind a desk in downtown Cincinnati. Sometimes, though, on dark nights when the wind makes the buildings creak and groan, I find myself listening for that distinctive moan that haunted the forest. And I wonder what's out there still, waiting in the darkest corners of the wilderness for unwary travelers who stray too far from the beaten path. My name is Valerie Rousseau, 41 years old, and I live in Cleveland where I run a moderately successful architectural consulting firm. Architecture has been my passion since childhood, when I would spend hours sketching imaginary buildings in the margins of my school notebooks. Cleveland's industrial skyline might not be everyone's idea of inspiration, but the blend of historic structures and modern design has always fascinated me. That's why when my brother Marcus mentioned an abandoned fire lookout tower in Hocking Hills he discovered while hiking, my professional curiosity was immediately piqued. The engineering is remarkable, Marcus had told me over our weekly video call, his excitement evident even through the pixelated connection. Pre-war construction that somehow survived decades of neglect. You've always had a thing for abandoned structures. This one's off the beaten path, but definitely worth the trip. He wasn't wrong. I'd built part of my reputation on repurposing forgotten buildings, finding the hidden beauty in what others had discarded. An abandoned lookout tower sounded like the perfect weekend project, something to distract me from the stress of an upcoming deadline. The drive from Cleveland to Hocking Hills took just over 3 hours, my Honda CR-V loaded with camping gear, surveying equipment, and enough supplies for a 4-day stay. I'd planned this trip meticulously, as I do most things in my life. Marcus had provided coordinates, though he'd warned me the tower wasn't on any official park maps since it had been decommissioned decades ago. I arrived at the main park entrance by early afternoon, the September sun creating dappled patterns through the canopy of trees that lined the parking area. Park visitors were sparse for a Thursday. Just a few families with young children exploring the easier trails and a handful of serious hikers gearing up for longer excursions. I checked in with the ranger station, deliberately vague about my destination. Just another solo hiker enjoying the beautiful weather. The young ranger on duty gave me a standard trail map and warnings about staying hydrated. I nodded politely, knowing my route would take me far beyond these neatly marked paths. After securing my parking permit, I shouldered my pack and headed out on Trail 6, which Marcus had told me would get me closest to my actual destination. The official trail was pleasant enough, well-maintained with gentle grades and wooden footbridges over the occasional stream. After about 2 miles, I checked my GPS and veered east into unmarked territory. The change was immediate and dramatic. Without the constant foot traffic of tourists, the forest felt older, wilder. The undergrowth grew thicker, requiring careful navigation around thorny bushes and fallen trees. Birds I couldn't identify called from the canopy above, their songs echoing strangely in the humid air. My first glimpse of the tower came through a natural clearing in the trees, a rusted metal skeleton rising incongruously from the forest floor. It stood on a rocky outcropping, at least 70 feet tall, silhouetted against the afternoon sky. I felt a familiar thrill of discovery, the same excitement I'd experienced when finding a forgotten Art Deco factory in Detroit or an abandoned subway station in Cincinnati. I snapped several photos with my digital camera, documenting the tower from multiple angles as I approached. Up close, the tower was even more impressive than I'd anticipated. The metal framework showed minimal structural damage despite decades of exposure to Ohio's harsh seasonal changes. The observation cabin at the top was a simple square design, utilitarian yet elegant in the way that early 20th century industrial architecture often was. Faded warning signs surrounded the base, their red lettering barely visible beneath layers of rust and grime. The ladder leading up had been removed at ground level, a safety precaution to discourage trespassers like me, but I'd come prepared with a lightweight collapsible ladder that would bridge the gap. Setting up my temporary bridge, I tested its stability before beginning my ascent. The metal of the tower's framework was rough beneath my gloved hands, occasional flakes of rust breaking off as I climbed. Each platform required careful testing before I committed my full weight, the structure creaking ominously in the afternoon breeze. By the time I reached the observation cabin, sweat had soaked through my shirt despite the moderate temperature. The door hung precariously from corroded hinges, requiring a firm push to open completely. Inside the cabin, time seemed to have stood still. An ancient logbook lay open on a built-in desk, its pages yellow and brittle, the last entry dated June 1976. Graffiti covered most of the walls, declarations of love, crude drawings, and the inevitable "Jason was here" variety of markings that spanned decades. The floor seemed solid enough, though I tested each board carefully before setting down my equipment. The windows, surprisingly, were mostly intact, offering spectacular 360-degree views of the forest canopy extending to distant ridges. This would be my home for the next several days. Isolated, peaceful, the perfect place to sketch, photograph, and document a forgotten piece of architectural history. If I'd known what waited for me in this serene forest setting, I would have deleted those coordinates and never ventured beyond the safety of Cleveland's concrete landscape. I woke to birdsong, sunlight streaming through the eastern windows of the observation cabin. My first night had been surprisingly comfortable. My self-inflating camping pad provided adequate cushioning from the hard wooden floor, and the tower's elevation caught pleasant breezes that kept the air from growing stagnant. After a simple breakfast of instant coffee and energy bars, I set up my laptop and began cataloging my initial observations of the tower's construction, periodically referring to the architectural reference books I'd brought along. By midday, I completed my preliminary assessment of the cabin and decided to document the tower's structural elements more thoroughly. Using a harness and safety line, I might be adventurous, but I'm not reckless. I carefully maneuvered outside the cabin onto the narrow maintenance walkway that circled it. The view was breathtaking, and I found myself frequently distracted from my technical documentation by the sheer beauty of the forest stretching out below me. Eventually, I noticed something unexpected about a quarter-mile northeast, what appeared to be the remains of a small structure, barely visible through the dense foliage. My curiosity piqued. I finished my exterior survey and descended the tower. The climb down was more nerve-wracking than going up had been, each metal crossbeam groaning slightly under my weight. Once on solid ground, I consulted my topographical map and GPS, plotting a route to the mysterious structure I'd spotted. According to my calculations, it would be about a 30-minute hike through relatively flat terrain. I packed a small day bag with water, energy bars, and my camera before setting off, leaving my main camp established in the tower. The forest seemed different at ground level, denser, more closed in, with shafts of sunlight penetrating the canopy at irregular intervals. I followed game trails where possible, occasionally consulting my GPS to correct my course. The usual woodland sounds accompanied my journey: birdsong, the rustle of small animals in the undergrowth, the distant tapping of woodpeckers. Yet as I drew closer to my destination, these sounds gradually diminished until I was walking in unsettling silence, broken only by the crunch of my boots on fallen leaves. What I found was not what I'd expected. Rather than the small cabin or shed I'd anticipated, I discovered the charred remains of what appeared to be a research station. Metal equipment frames, warped and blackened, stood among the ashes of what had once been a substantial structure. The fire seemed relatively recent, perhaps within the last year, as the forest had not yet fully reclaimed the clearing. Most disturbing were the metal cages scattered around the perimeter, ranging in size from small animal traps to one large enough to hold a human being. I carefully documented the site with my camera, an uneasy feeling growing in the pit of my stomach. This was no ordinary forest fire or abandoned camp. The arrangement of equipment, the systematic destruction, everything pointed to a deliberate attempt to eliminate evidence of whatever research had been conducted here. One partially intact filing cabinet caught my attention. Though its exterior was scorched, the metal had protected some of the contents from complete destruction. Inside, I found the charred edges of documents bearing an unfamiliar logo, a stylized tree with what looked like a double helix winding around its trunk. As I photographed the remnants of the papers, a sharp crack echoed through the trees behind me, the unmistakable sound of a branch breaking under weight. I spun around, heart suddenly racing, but saw nothing but forest. "Hello," I called out, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the silent clearing. No response came, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Deciding I'd seen enough, I quickly packed my camera and began the trek back to the tower, moving considerably faster than I had on the outbound journey. Several times during my return hike, I paused, certain I'd heard footsteps paralleling my own. Each time I stopped, the sound ceased immediately, resuming only when I continued walking. Logic told me it was probably an echo effect caused by the terrain, or perhaps a curious deer shadowing me from a safe distance. Yet my instincts screamed otherwise. The deliberate quality of the movement, always just out of sight, felt purposeful in a way no animal's behavior would be. By the time the tower came into view, I was nearly jogging, relief flooding through me at the sight of its metal framework rising above the trees. The climb back up felt interminable, my hands slippery with nervous sweat despite the coolness of the afternoon. When I finally reached the cabin, I immediately closed and secured the door as best I could with the length of rope I'd brought for emergencies. Night was falling earlier than I'd expected, shadows lengthening across the forest floor below. As I prepared a cold dinner, my camping stove suddenly seemed like an unnecessary fire hazard. I tried to rationalize what I'd seen and felt during my excursion. Perhaps the research station had been illegal. Poachers or unauthorized wildlife researchers who'd abandoned their camp when discovered. Perhaps the footsteps had been my imagination, triggered by the unsettling discovery. As darkness settled completely over the forest, I huddled in my sleeping bag with my flashlight and field journal, attempting to record the day's findings in the objective, analytical style that characterized my professional work. But my normally precise handwriting wavered on the page, and I found myself repeatedly drawn to the windows, scanning the darkness below for movement. Something about this place felt profoundly wrong, a disquiet that went beyond the simple unease of being alone in the wilderness. The logical part of my brain insisted I was overreacting to an abandoned research site, while a more primitive instinct urged me to leave immediately. Tower documentation be damned. I eventually fell into a fitful sleep, my dreams filled with burning buildings and footsteps that never quite caught up to me. Dawn arrived, shrouded in mist. The forest below the tower transformed into an ethereal landscape of gray and green. I'd slept poorly, waking frequently to every creak of the tower adjusting to the night winds. My morning coffee tasted bitter and did little to dispel the fog of fatigue clouding my thoughts. Still, I was determined to continue my work. I'd come here for a purpose, and a burned-out research station and some paranoia weren't going to derail my plans. I set up my equipment methodically, focusing on the detailed measurements of the cabin's interior that I'd scheduled for day 2. The work provided a welcome distraction, the familiar routine of measuring, sketching, and photographing gradually easing my anxiety. By mid-morning, the mist had burned away, revealing another perfect autumn day. Through the western window, I noticed movement in the distant trees, a flash of color that didn't belong to the fall foliage. Grabbing my binoculars, I focused on the area and spotted what appeared to be a person moving through the forest, wearing what looked like a white hazmat suit. My first reaction was relief. Another human being, confirmation that I wasn't completely alone in this wilderness. But as I watched the figure's methodical movement through the trees, that relief quickly transformed back into unease. Why would someone be wearing protective gear in a national forest? Could it be related to the burned research station? The figure paused occasionally, seeming to examine the ground or collect samples, before continuing on a path that appeared to be leading directly toward the tower. I debated my options quickly. If this was a park ranger or legitimate researcher, they might have information about the tower or the burned-out site I discovered. On the other hand, if they were connected to whatever dubious activities had been conducted at that site, revealing my presence might not be wise. In the end, curiosity won out over caution. I descended the tower quickly, planning to intercept the figure before they reached my temporary home. Better to meet on open ground than to be potentially trapped in the cabin. The forest floor was dappled with late morning sunlight as I made my way toward where I'd last seen the white-suited figure. The usual woodland sounds had returned since yesterday, birds calling, squirrels chattering as they gathered fall nuts, which I took as a positive sign. I traveled about a quarter mile when I heard voices ahead, not one person but several, speaking in low, urgent tones. I slowed my pace, moving more carefully to avoid announcing my presence before I could assess the situation. Through a screen of young saplings, I finally spotted them. 3 individuals in white protective suits with clear face shields, clustered around what appeared to be scientific equipment set up in a small clearing. The logo on their suits was immediately familiar, the same stylized tree with a double helix I'd seen on the chart documents. I froze, suddenly aware that I'd stumbled onto something far more complex than an architectural curiosity. These people were clearly connected to the burned research station, and they were back, continuing whatever work had been disrupted by the fire. I must have made some small noise, because one of the figures suddenly looked up, staring directly toward my hiding place. "Who's there?" a female voice called out, her tone more annoyed than alarmed. "This is a restricted research area." I considered running, but realized how suspicious that would appear. Instead, I straightened up and stepped into view, adopting my most professional demeanor despite my hiking clothes and 3-day stubble. "I'm Valerie Rousseau, an architectural consultant," I explained, approaching cautiously but confidently. "I'm documenting the fire lookout tower for a historical preservation project." The lie came easily, sounding plausible even to my own ears. The 3 researchers exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable behind their face shields. The woman who had spoken removed her helmet, revealing a severe face framed by gray-streaked black hair pulled into a tight bun. "Dr. Eleanor Harlow." She introduced herself curtly. "And you shouldn't be here, Ms. Rousseau. This entire area is temporarily closed for environmental assessment following the controlled burn last season." Her colleagues remained silent, one continuing to work with the equipment while the other stood slightly behind Dr. Harlow, his posture suggesting alertness. "The tower in particular is structurally unsound and scheduled for demolition next month. I'm afraid you'll need to pack up your equipment and leave immediately." Something in her tone set off alarm bells in my mind. The explanation was reasonable, yet delivered with an intensity that seemed disproportionate. And controlled burn was a convenient explanation for the destruction I'd witnessed. I wasn't informed of any closure when I checked in at the ranger station. I countered, watching their reactions carefully. And my brother hiked through here just last month without encountering any restrictions. Dr. Harlow's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. The closure is recent and unfortunately not well publicized due to staffing issues. As for the tower, it's genuinely dangerous. The structural assessment found significant metal fatigue that could lead to catastrophic failure. She gestured to one of her silent colleagues, who produced what looked like an official document in a plastic sleeve. Here's the closure order if you'd like to verify. Now, I must insist you leave the area today. We can have one of our team escort you back to the main trail if you need assistance. The document appeared authentic, complete with Forestry Service letterhead and official stamps. But something felt deeply wrong about the entire interaction. Why were environmental scientists wearing what amounted to biohazard suits in a supposedly safe area? Why had the controlled burn targeted only the research equipment and not the surrounding forest? And why was Dr. Harlow so insistent on my immediate departure when I posed no obvious threat to their work? I appreciate your concern, I said carefully, but I've already set up camp in the tower, and my equipment is quite extensive. I'll need until tomorrow morning to pack everything properly. I was stalling, hoping to buy time to gather more information about what was really happening here. Dr. Harlow's eyes narrowed slightly, and I could almost see her calculating the risks of allowing me to stay versus forcing the issue. Very well, she finally conceded. But no later than 10 a.m. tomorrow. And please remain in the tower overnight. The wildlife in this area has been behaving unpredictably since the fire. For your own safety. The warning seemed genuine, which somehow made it more unsettling. The silent researcher finally spoke up, his voice muffled by his helmet. Should we send Richards to help her pack up, Dr. Harlow? There was something odd in his tone, nervousness, perhaps, a reluctance. That won't be necessary, Quan, Dr. Harlow replied without looking at him. Ms. Rousseau seems quite capable. She turned back to me with a thin smile that didn't reach her eyes. We'll check in with you tomorrow morning to ensure you've vacated safely. Good day. The dismissal was clear, and I nodded politely before turning to head back toward the tower. As I walked away, I could feel their eyes boring into my back, and it took considerable willpower not to break into a run. Whatever these people were doing in the forest, they didn't want witnesses. And I had just become exactly that. I spent the remainder of the day in a state of heightened vigilance, alternating between packing my equipment and watching the forest below through my binoculars. Dr. Harlow and her team had relocated their equipment several times, always maintaining what appeared to be a rough perimeter around the tower. Were they studying me? Containing something? The more I observed, the less their behavior resembled legitimate environmental research. As darkness approached, they retreated from sight, heading in the direction of the burned research station I'd discovered earlier. Night fell with unsettling swiftness, the forest below transforming into an impenetrable sea of black. I kept all lights to a minimum, using only my small headlamp when absolutely necessary. Something told me it would be unwise to advertise my presence more than necessary. As I finished securing my equipment for a hasty departure in the morning, a new sound emerged from the darkness, a low humming that seemed to vibrate through the metal structure of the tower itself. It wasn't mechanical, not exactly, but had a rhythmic quality that suggested intelligence rather than natural phenomena. Around midnight, the humming stopped abruptly, replaced by absolute silence. The usual nocturnal forest sounds, owls, insects, the rustle of night creatures, were completely absent, as if the woods themselves were holding their breath. I extinguished my headlamp and moved to the western window, straining to see into the darkness below. At first, nothing. Then, a faint greenish glow appeared near where I'd last seen Dr. Harlow's team, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. As I watched, the glow separated into multiple points of light, moving independently through the trees. My fascination overcame my fear, and I retrieved my camera, attaching the night vision lens I'd brought for capturing architectural details in low light. Through the viewfinder, the green lights resolved into what appeared to be floating orbs, each about the size of a basketball, moving with deliberate purpose through the forest. They navigated between trees with impossible precision, occasionally pausing as if to examine something before continuing their silent patrol. I counted 7 distinct orbs, maintaining a roughly circular formation around the tower. A sudden movement at the base of the tower caught my attention. A human figure, wearing one of those white protective suits but without the helmet, was beginning to climb the metal framework. Even from this distance, I recognized Dr. Harlow's severe burn. What could possibly be important enough to risk climbing the supposedly structurally unsound tower in the middle of the night? I quickly packed my camera and retreated from the window, heart hammering in my chest. There was only one entrance to the cabin, and nowhere to hide except perhaps under the small built-in desk. The sound of Dr. Harlow's climbing grew louder, metal creaking under her weight. I made a split-second decision and moved to the cabin door, positioning myself behind it so I would be concealed when it opened. The climb seemed to take forever, giving me too much time to question my choice. Should I confront her directly? Pretend to be asleep? The handle turned slowly, and the door swung inward with a protesting groan from its aged hinges. Dr. Harlow stepped inside, sweeping a flashlight across the cabin interior. "Ms. Rousseau," she called softly, moving toward my sleeping bag, which lay empty but arranged to potentially conceal a sleeping form. "I need to speak with you urgently." There was something different in her voice now, a tension that hadn't been present during our earlier interaction. She moved closer to the sleeping bag, and I seized my opportunity, slipping out from behind the door and blocking the exit. Dr. Harlow spun around, her flashlight beam momentarily blinding me. "What are those things in the forest?" I demanded, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And what was really happening at that research station before it burned?" For a moment, Dr. Harlow simply stared at me, her face a mask of conflicting emotions. Then, surprisingly, her shoulders slumped slightly, the facade of authority cracking. "You've seen them," she said, not a question but a statement of fact. "The bioluminescent anomalies. We call them monitors, though that's not entirely accurate. And now they've seen you too, which complicates matters considerably." She moved to the desk and sat down heavily, suddenly looking much older than she had earlier. The research station was studying them, their patterns, their behavior, their influence on local wildlife and plant life, until someone decided our research was too dangerous to continue. I remained by the door, still not trusting her sudden openness. "Someone burned your station?" "Who? We don't know," she admitted, rubbing her temples wearily. "Government, private interests, maybe even the entities themselves. What matters is that they're growing more active, and now they've detected an unauthorized presence, you. The restrictions on this area aren't bureaucratic fiction, Ms. Rousseau. They're a quarantine, and you've just breached it." My mind raced to process this information, to find some rational explanation that didn't involve entities or quarantines. If this area is so dangerous, why are you here? Why continue the research? Dr. Harlow's laugh was hollow. "Because these things are spreading, and we need to understand them before they reach populated areas." The burn was a setback, but it also accelerated their life cycle in ways we hadn't anticipated. She stood abruptly, moving to the eastern window and gesturing for me to join her. Cautiously, I approached, maintaining distance between us. Outside, the green orbs had changed their pattern, moving in what appeared to be a spiral formation, gradually tightening around the tower. "They're hunting," Dr. Harlow said quietly. "They sense your presence as foreign, different from our team, who they've become accustomed to. By dawn, they'll converge on this tower. I came to warn you, to help you leave before that happens." "Why should I trust you?" I asked, though the sight of those methodically moving lights was beginning to erode my skepticism. "This whole situation feels like some elaborate attempt to scare me away from whatever's really happening here." "Because I've seen what they do to animals they catch," she replied simply. "And because despite what you may think, I'm not willing to let a human being suffer that fate, even one who's compromised our research area." She pulled a small device from her pocket, what looked like a modified flashlight with an unusual bulb. "This emits a frequency they find disorienting. It won't stop them, but it might slow them down long enough for us to reach our vehicle. My team has a Jeep parked about a mile northeast of here. We can get you to the main road before sunrise." The earnestness in her voice was convincing, or perhaps it was the genuine fear I now saw in her eyes as she watched the orb's movement. Either way, I was rapidly concluding that staying in the tower until morning was not an option I wanted to exercise. "How much time do I have to gather my things?" I asked, already mentally prioritizing what equipment I could afford to leave behind. 10 minutes, Dr. Harlow said grimly. Pack only what you can carry comfortably while moving quickly. Your life is more important than your research. She moved to the door, opening it slightly to peer down the tower framework. They haven't started climbing yet, but they will soon. Their behavior patterns are becoming more aggressive, more. Her voice trailed off as a new sound emerged from the forest, a high-pitched keening that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The green orbs below had stopped their spiral movement and were now pulsing more rapidly, their glow intensifying. Dr. Harlow swore under her breath. Change of plans. We leave now, with whatever you're wearing and can grab in the next 30 seconds. The urgency in her voice spurred me to action. I snatched my backpack, stuffing my wallet, phone, and camera inside, then quickly pulled on my jacket. Dr. Harlow was already at the door, the strange device in her hand glowing with a soft blue light. Stay close to me, she instructed. Don't stop for anything. Don't look back, and whatever you do, don't touch the orbs if they approach you. With that ominous warning, she began the descent, moving with surprising agility for someone her age. I followed, adrenaline making the climb down seem simultaneously faster and more treacherous than before. The metal framework vibrated with that same unsettling hum I'd heard earlier, growing louder as we descended. Below us, the green orbs had begun to move toward the base of the tower, their glow casting eerie shadows across the forest floor. About halfway down, one of the orbs suddenly shot upward, moving directly toward us with alarming speed. Dr. Harlow pointed her device at it, triggering a pulse of blue light that caused the orb to veer off course, wobbling erratically before retreating. We reached the ground just as the remaining orbs converged on the tower's base. Dr. Harlow immediately set off at a brisk pace, not quite running, but moving with clear purpose through the trees. I stayed close behind her, my breath coming in ragged gasps more from fear than exertion. Behind us, the keening sound intensified, accompanied by a crackling noise like electrical discharge. I risked a quick glance back and immediately wished I hadn't. The orbs were pulsing so brightly now that they illuminated a wide area around the tower, and in that sickly green light, I could see the metal structure beginning to corrode before my eyes, rust spreading like a time-lapse video of decay. Dr. Harlow grabbed my arm, yanking me forward. "Don't look," she hissed. "It affects organic matter too. Eyes, brain tissue. Keep moving." We ran then, no longer bothering with stealth, crashing through underbrush and leaping over fallen logs. The forest seemed to close in around us, branches reaching like grasping fingers, roots rising to trip our hurried steps. Whether this was reality or my panicked imagination, I couldn't tell, but the effect was the same, a nightmare chase through increasingly hostile terrain. After what seemed like an eternity but was probably only 10 minutes of frantic movement, we broke through into a small clearing where a jeep was parked, its dark shape a welcome sight in the moonlight. Two figures in white suits stood beside it, both helmetless now, revealing the faces of younger researchers, a woman with close-cropped blonde hair and the man Dr. Harlow had called Quan. They rushed forward to meet us, faces taut with concern. "They're moving faster than predicted," Dr. Harlow gasped as we reached the vehicle. "Full breach protocol. We need to get Ms. Rousseau to the containment checkpoint for decontamination." The others nodded grimly, helping me into the back seat of the Jeep while Dr. Harlow took the driver's position. As Quan closed my door, I caught sight of something that made my blood run cold. A line of green light emerging from the trees at the edge of the clearing, not discrete orbs now, but a continuous, undulating wave of bioluminescence that seemed to be flowing over the ground like liquid. "Drive," the blonde woman shouted, barely getting her door closed before Dr. Harlow stomped on the accelerator. The Jeep lurched forward, bouncing violently as it left the clearing and hit what was barely a trail through the trees. Through the rear window, I watched in horror as the green wave surged into the space we'd just vacated, seeming to consume rather than merely cover the ground it passed over. Where it touched trees, the bark blackened instantly, peeling away in strips to reveal pulsing green light beneath. We careened through the forest at dangerous speed, the Jeep's headlights illuminating our path just seconds before we reached it. No one spoke. The only sounds were the engine's roar and the occasional grunt as we were thrown against our seatbelts by the rough terrain. I lost all sense of direction, focusing only on the fact that we were moving away from the horror behind us. After about 15 minutes of this punishing journey, the trees began to thin, and I spotted what looked like a chain-link fence ahead, topped with barbed wire and warning signs. A gate appeared in our headlights, manned by figures in even more substantial protective gear than Dr. Harlow's team had worn. Dr. Harlow flashed the Jeep's lights in what was clearly a predetermined signal, and the gate swung open just in time for us to pass through. Beyond was what looked like a military-style checkpoint: temporary buildings, floodlights, and more personnel in protective suits. As we skidded to a halt, I felt a wave of relief so powerful it left me lightheaded. Whatever danger we'd been fleeing seemed unable to pass this barrier, at least for now. Dr. Harlow turned to me, her expression grim but no longer panicked. "Welcome to Containment Site Bravo, Ms. Rousseau. I'm afraid your architectural survey just got considerably more complicated." As armed personnel surrounded our vehicle and someone approached with what looked like a radiation detector, I realized with sinking certainty that my weekend project had just become something far more dangerous, and that my chance of simply returning to my normal life in Cleveland had potentially disappeared along with the abandoned fire lookout tower now being consumed by whatever unearthly phenomenon we'd narrowly escaped. The decontamination process was thorough and humiliating. A series of showers with progressively less caustic solutions, followed by a full medical examination that included blood draws, tissue samples, and neurological tests I'd never heard of before. Throughout it all, I was treated with clinical detachment, as if I were a potentially hazardous specimen rather than a person. My clothes and equipment were taken for analysis, leaving me in a standard-issue jumpsuit that hung loosely on my frame, the word visitor stamped across the back like a brand. 6 hours after our arrival at the checkpoint, I found myself in what amounted to a holding cell, a small room with a cot, sink, and toilet, its only window a reinforced glass panel in the door. Dr. Harlow had disappeared immediately after our arrival, whisked away for debriefing according to the stone-faced security officer who'd escorted me here. I demanded explanations, contact with the outside world, legal representation, all met with the same response. Dr. Harlow will address your concerns when she's available. Sleep was impossible despite my exhaustion. My mind raced with fragments of what I'd witnessed: the glowing orbs, the wave of bioluminescence consuming everything in its path, the abandoned research station reduced to ash. None of it fit into my carefully ordered understanding of reality. I was an architect, for God's sake, someone who dealt in concrete and steel and the comforting predictability of physics. Whatever was happening in Hocking Hills existed outside those parameters, in a realm I had no framework to comprehend. The door finally opened around dawn, revealing not Dr. Harlow but a man in a crisp military uniform, his rank insignia identifying him as a colonel, though no name was visible on his fatigues. "Ms. Rousseau," he said, his voice precisely neutral. "I'm Colonel Merritt. If you'll come with me, please." It wasn't a request. I followed him through a maze of identical corridors to a room furnished only with a metal table and 2 chairs. The walls were bare except for a large mirror that almost certainly concealed an observation area. "Sit down," Colonel Merritt instructed, taking one of the chairs. I complied, too drained to resist this obvious interrogation setup. "I need you to tell me exactly what you saw in the restricted area, from the moment you arrived until Dr. Harlow brought you here." His tone was conversational, but his eyes were cold, assessing. I recounted my experience as precisely as I could, from the tower's architecture to the burned research station to the night's terrifying escape. The colonel's expression never changed, but he took occasional notes on a small pad. When I finished, he leaned back slightly. "And what do you believe you witnessed, Ms. Rousseau? In your professional opinion?" The question caught me off guard. Was he actually asking for my interpretation? "I don't know," I admitted after a pause. "Some kind of bioluminescent organism with corrosive properties? An environmental contamination that affects perception? Military weapons testing gone wrong?" I shrugged helplessly. "Nothing in my experience explains what I saw." Colonel Merritt nodded as if this answer satisfied him. "What you encountered is classified under the highest levels of national security," he said matter-of-factly. "Its origin, nature, and current containment strategies are not information you are cleared to receive. However, your situation presents us with a dilemma." He steepled his fingers, studying me with unnerving intensity. You've been exposed to the phenomenon at close range. While initial tests show no physical contamination, there are other concerns. A chill ran through me at his phrasing. What kind of concerns? I asked, my mouth suddenly dry. Cognitive, he replied simply. Psychological. The phenomenon has been known to affect neural pathways, creating lasting alterations in perception and behavior that may not manifest immediately. He pushed a document across the table toward me. This outlines the protocols for individuals in your situation. You have two options: voluntary commitment to a specialized monitoring facility for a period of not less than 6 months, or acceptance into the research division as a civilian contractor under lifetime confidentiality restrictions. I stared at him in disbelief. You can't be serious. I have a business, clients who depend on me, a life in Cleveland. You can't just. We can and we will. Colonel Merritt cut me off, his voice hardening. This isn't negotiable, Ms. Rousseau. The phenomenon represents a national security threat of the highest order. Your exposure has already compromised you. He tapped the document with one finger. Choose. I stared at the paper, my mind racing through impossible scenarios, escape attempts, legal challenges, calls to influential clients, all ending at the same insurmountable wall of classified operations and military authority. How long do I have to decide? I asked finally. Now. Colonel Merritt replied without hesitation. The monitoring facility offers safety, but limited freedom. The research division means working with Dr. Harlow's team to understand and contain what you've encountered. Either way, your old life is over. His clinical detachment somehow made the devastating reality more absolute. My architectural practice, my apartment in Cleveland, my friendships and professional relationships, all would become part of a past I could never fully explain. Research division, I said, the words feeling like surrender and defiance simultaneously. 1 month later, I was designing specialized containment structures for what I now knew was called the Helixinity, a biological anomaly of unknown origin with properties that defied conventional science. My architectural knowledge had given me unexpected value to the project, and occasionally, in the facility's eerie green-tinged light, I'd catch Dr. Harlow watching me with something between curiosity and regret. We never spoke of that night in the forest, but sometimes I'd wake from nightmares of corrosive light and metal towers crumbling into dust, wondering if the entity was still changing me from within, reshaping my mind as surely as it had reshaped my life. I'm Elias Carver, 32 years old, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I'm a graphic designer, always chasing a break from the city's grind. My buddy Theo, a wiry 30-year-old mechanic with a knack for bad jokes, and his girlfriend Mara, 28, a quiet nurse with a sharp wit, convinced me to join them for a camping trip in Hocking Hills State Park, Ohio. We'd been itching for adventure, and Theo found this old fire lookout tower on some obscure hiking forum. Abandoned, creepy, perfect for a thrill. I packed my beat-up Jeep Cherokee with gear, snacks, and a cheap cooler, and we hit the road, the three of us laughing about how we'd probably get lost. The drive was smooth, just us, bad playlists, and Mara's eye rolls at Theo's puns. The park's dense forest swallowed us as we arrived, the tower looming like a skeleton against the dusk. The air in Hocking Hills was crisp, heavy with pine and damp earth. We parked near a trailhead, the Jeep's tires crunching gravel. The tower was a good hike in, and my legs burned from hauling our gear. Theo kept saying it'd be epic, but Mara seemed uneasy, glancing at the darkening woods. The tower was rusted, its paint peeling like dead skin, with a rickety ladder leading to a small platform. I felt a chill, not just from the cold. We climbed up, the metal groaning under our weight. Inside, it was bare, dusty floorboards, a cracked window, and a musty smell. We set up sleeping bags, joking about ghosts to shake off the eerie vibe. Theo cracked open a beer, and we toasted to surviving the horror movie we're clearly in. I couldn't shake the feeling that the tower was watching us. Its walls creaked like it was breathing. Mara pointed out scratches on the floor, deep and jagged, like something had been dragged. Probably just old equipment, Theo said, but his voice wavered. We cooked hot dogs over a camp stove, the flames casting weird shadows. I kept glancing at the window, expecting to see someone staring back. The forest was too quiet. No birds, no wind, just this heavy, disturbing silence. Mara whispered she felt like we weren't alone. I laughed it off, but my gut twisted. We played cards to distract ourselves, but every creak of the tower made us freeze. Theo suggested a nighttime hike to lighten the mood, and I agreed, ignoring the growing dread. The trail was narrow, swallowed by trees that seemed to lean in. My flashlight flickered, and I cursed myself for not checking the batteries. Theo led the way, his bravado fading as the path grew darker. Mara clung to my arm, her nails digging in. We found a clearing with an old fire pit, charred rocks scattered like bones. "This place is straight up scary," Theo admitted, kicking a rock. I nodded, my heart pounding for no clear reason. We decided to head back, but the trail looked different, like it had shifted. My phone had no signal, and the map app was useless. Mara's voice shook as she asked if we were lost. I lied, saying we were fine, but the tower's silhouette in the distance felt wrong, like it wasn't where we left it. Back at the tower, we climbed the ladder, each step creaking like a warning. The platform felt smaller, the air thicker. I noticed a faint smell, like rotting meat, but couldn't place it. Theo tried to joke, but his laugh was hollow. We zipped into our sleeping bags, the floor hard against my back. I stared at the ceiling, where faint marks looked like claw scratches. Mara whispered about a story she'd read online. An old ranger who vanished in these woods years ago. "Probably just a myth," I said, but my voice sounded thin. The tower groaned louder, like it was settling, or waking up. I told myself it was just an old structure, but the disturbing feeling wouldn't quit. I drifted to sleep, the forest's silence pressing against my chest. Morning light barely pierced the tower's grimy windows. I woke up stiff, my neck sore from the hard floor. Theo was already up, brewing coffee on the stove, but Mara looked pale, staring out the window. She said she'd heard something in the night, like breathing, not human. I brushed it off, blaming the wind, but there was no wind. We ate breakfast, the canned beans tasting like ash in my mouth. Theo suggested exploring the tower's lower level, a cramped storage area we hadn't checked. The idea made my skin crawl, but I didn't want to seem paranoid. The ladder down was rusted, and I hesitated, my hands sweaty. Something about that dark space below felt wrong, like it was waiting for us. The storage area was a tight, dusty room with broken crates and old papers. My flashlight caught something, a faded photo of a ranger, his eyes scratched out. "That's messed up," Theo muttered, stepping back. Mara grabbed my arm, pointing to a pile of bones in the corner. They looked small, maybe animal, but the way they were arranged felt deliberate, almost ritualistic. My stomach churned. I tried to laugh, saying it was probably a coyote's leftovers, but the horror in Mara's eyes mirrored mine. We climbed back up, the ladder shaking like it might collapse. Back on the platform, we sat in silence, the tower's creaks louder now, more insistent. I noticed my Jeep keys were missing from my bag. I tore through my stuff, panic rising. I asked Theo and Mara if they'd seen the keys, but they hadn't. We searched the tower, every corner, but they were gone. "Maybe they fell outside," Theo said, but his voice was tight. We agreed to look around the base of the tower, but the forest felt different now, the trees too still, the air too heavy. I kept thinking about that photo, those bones. Something was off, and not just the missing keys. As we stepped outside, I noticed the Jeep's door was slightly ajar. I swore I'd locked it. My heart hammered as I approached, the disturbing realization hitting me that someone, or something, had been inside. The forest seemed to hold its breath, watching us. We reached the Jeep, and I froze. The seats were torn, stuffing spilling out like guts. A faint, rotten smell lingered inside. Mara gasped, pointing to the dashboard. Scratched into it was a single word: leave. My hands shook as I backed away. Theo tried to stay calm, saying it was probably local kids messing with us, but his eyes were wide with fear. We hadn't seen another soul since we arrived. The horror of it sank in. We were alone, in a place that didn't want us. I looked back at the tower, its rusted frame looming like a warning. Something was coming, and we weren't ready. I stood by the Jeep, staring at the scratched word leave, my pulse pounding in my ears. The forest around Hocking Hills State Park felt like it was closing in, the trees too tall, too quiet. Theo kicked a tire, muttering about damn vandals, but his hands were shaking. Mara was silent, her eyes darting to the tower like she expected something to crawl out. I suggested we pack up and go, but without my keys, we were stuck. The Jeep's torn seats and that rotten smell made my skin crawl. Something about it felt personal, like a warning meant just for us. We decided to search the area again, hoping the keys had fallen nearby, but my gut screamed this wasn't just bad luck. We fanned out around the Jeep, combing through leaves and dirt. I kept glancing at the tower, its rusted frame looking more like a cage every second. Mara found a rusted canteen half buried in the soil, initials JR scratched on it. "Maybe it's that Ranger's," she whispered, her voice barely audible. I shrugged, trying to stay calm, but the thought of that missing Ranger from her story gnawed at me. Theo called out, holding up a broken knife blade. No handle, just sharp steel. "This place is a junkyard," he said, but his joke fell flat. The air felt heavier now, like the forest was holding its breath. I noticed footprints, not ours, leading toward the tower. They were faint, barefoot, and way too big. I didn't say anything about the footprints. No need to freak everyone out more. Instead, I suggested we head back to the tower to regroup. Theo argued we should hike to the main road for help, but Mara shot that down, saying we'd never make it before dark. She was right. Hocking Hills was a maze, and my phone's GPS was useless. We climbed back to the platform, the ladder creaking louder than before. Inside, the air was thick, that rotting smell stronger now. I checked my bag again, hoping I'd missed the keys, but found a torn page instead, a map of the park, with our location circled in red. I hadn't packed it. "What the hell?" I muttered, showing it to Theo. Theo's face paled as he studied the map. "This wasn't here before," he said, his voice low. Mara grabbed it, her hands trembling. The circle was messy, drawn in something thick and dark, like blood. "We need to leave, Elias," she said, her eyes wide with horror. I nodded, but without the keys, we were trapped. I suggested checking the storage area again. Maybe we'd missed something. Theo hesitated, glancing at the trapdoor. "That place gives me the creeps," he admitted. I felt it too, but we had to do something. We grabbed flashlights and climbed down, the ladder shaking like it might snap. The storage room was colder now, the air thick with that disturbing rotten smell. The bones we'd seen yesterday were still there, but now they were arranged differently, like someone had moved them. My flashlight caught more scratches on the walls, fresh ones, deep and jagged. "This is messed up," Theo whispered, backing toward the ladder. Mara pointed to a corner, a pile of old clothes, stained and torn, like they'd been worn recently. I stepped closer, my heart racing, and saw a name tag. J. Ramsey Ranger. The same initials as the canteen. My mouth went dry. I told myself it was just coincidence, but the horror of it hit hard. Whoever, or whatever, was here knew we were too. I grabbed Mara's arm, pulling her back to the ladder, but something heavy thudded above us. We froze, listening. The thud came again, slow and deliberate, from the platform above. My mind raced. Had someone followed us? I whispered for Theo to go first, my flashlight shaking in my hand. He climbed, each step creaking, and I held my breath, waiting for something to grab him. Mara was right behind, her face pale as death. Back on the platform, we found nothing, no one, but one of our sleeping bags was slashed open, stuffing spilling like guts. "This isn't kids," Mara said, her voice breaking. I agreed, the scary truth sinking in. We decided to barricade the trapdoor with crates, but they were flimsy, barely holding. The tower felt alive, its creaks like whispers now. I suggested we take turns keeping watch. Theo volunteered first, gripping the broken knife blade like a lifeline. Mara and I tried to rest, but sleep was impossible. Every creak, every rustle outside, made my heart jump. I kept thinking about that Ranger, Jay, Ramsey, and the stories Mara mentioned. People don't just vanish in these woods, do they? Around midnight, Theo hissed my name, pointing to the window. Something moved outside, a shape, tall and thin, too fast to make out. My stomach dropped. Probably just a deer. I lied, but Theo's wide eyes told me he didn't buy it. The disturbing feeling grew, like we were being hunted. We sat in silence, staring at the window. The shape didn't reappear, but the air felt charged, like a storm was coming. Mara clutched the map, her knuckles white. "We need to find those keys," she whispered. I nodded, but the thought of searching outside again made my skin crawl. Theo suggested checking the Jeep one more time, maybe under the seats. It was a long shot, but we had no better ideas. As we planned, a low, guttural sound echoed from the forest. Not an animal, not human, just wrong. My blood ran cold. We looked at each other, no one daring to speak. The tower's walls seemed to lean in, trapping us. I grabbed my flashlight, trying to act braver than I felt. "Let's check the Jeep at first light," I said, my voice steadier than my nerves. Theo nodded, but Mara just stared at the trapdoor, like she expected it to burst open. The guttural sound came again, closer this time, and I swear the tower shook. We huddled together, the flashlight beam dancing across the walls. The horror of our situation was clear. We were stuck in this abandoned tower, with something out there watching, waiting. I didn't know what it was, but I knew one thing. We weren't alone anymore, and whatever was out there wasn't friendly. Dawn broke over Hocking Hills, but the light felt wrong, gray and sickly, like the forest was sick. I barely slept, my eyes burning from staring at the trapdoor all night. Theo was pacing, gripping that broken knife blade, while Mara sat curled up, clutching the creepy map with its blood-red circle. The guttural sound from last night hadn't returned, but the silence was worse, heavy and suffocating. We agreed to check the Jeep again, hoping to find my keys and get the hell out. My stomach churned as we climbed down the tower's ladder, each creak sounding like a scream in the quiet. The forest watched us, and I couldn't shake the disturbing feeling that we were being stalked. The Jeep was still there, its torn seats mocking us. I crawled under it, scraping my hands on the dirt, but no keys. Theo checked the dashboard, his face tight with fear. "This is bad, Elias," he muttered, glancing at the scratched leaf. Mara stayed close, her eyes scanning the trees. That's when I saw it, a fresh footprint, same as before, barefoot and huge, pressed deep into the mud near the Jeep. My heart stopped. I pointed it out, and Mara's breath hitched. "That wasn't here yesterday," she whispered. Theo tried to laugh it off, saying maybe it was a hiker, but his voice cracked. The scary truth was sinking in. Something was out here with us, and it wasn't human. We hurried back to the tower, the ladder shaking under our weight. Inside, the air was thicker, the rotten smell now choking. I noticed the crates we'd used to barricade the trapdoor were shifted, like something had pushed them. My pulse raced as I checked the storage room's hatch. It was still locked, but the wood around it was splintered. "Something tried to get up here," I said, my voice barely steady. Mara's eyes widened, and Theo gripped his knife tighter. We decided to stick together, no more splitting up. I suggested searching the platform for anything useful, like a radio or tools, but the horror of what we'd found below, those bones, that ranger's name tag, kept creeping into my head. I rifled through a dusty corner and found an old logbook, its pages yellowed and brittle. The last entry, dated 1997, was from J. Ramsey, the ranger. "It's watching. Can't leave," it read, the handwriting shaky. My stomach dropped. I showed it to Theo and Mara, and their faces went pale. "What the hell does that mean?" Theo asked, his voice low. Mara shook her head, tears in her eyes. I didn't have an answer, but the disturbing words stuck with me. We kept searching, finding nothing but cobwebs and rusted nails. Then Mara screamed, pointing to the window. Scratched into the glass, still wet, were the words, "You were warned." My knees went weak. Theo cursed, backing away from the window. I tried to stay calm, saying maybe it was a prank, but my voice sounded hollow. The forest outside was too still, like it was waiting. We decided to barricade the door to the platform, piling up our gear and the few crates we had. It felt pointless, but we needed to do something. My flashlight flickered, and I smacked it, praying it wouldn't die. Mara kept muttering about the ranger, how he vanished, how maybe he never left. I told her to focus, but my own fear was clawing at me. The tower felt smaller, like it was shrinking around us. Then we heard it, a low, guttural growl, same as last night, but closer, right below the tower. My heart pounded so hard I thought it had burst. Theo peered out the window, his face ashen. "There's something down there," he whispered. I looked, and my blood ran cold. A shape moved in the shadows, tall, thin, too long to be human, its limbs bent wrong. It didn't look at us, just circled the tower, slow and deliberate. The horror of it hit me like a truck. Mara grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "What is that?" she hissed. I couldn't answer. It wasn't a bear, not a person, just wrong. We backed away from the window, huddling in the center of the platform. The growling stopped, but the silence was worse, like the thing was listening. I whispered we should stay quiet, wait it out. Theo nodded, but his hands shook so bad he dropped the knife. Mara clutched the logbook like it could save us. I kept thinking about that ranger's note. It's watching. Was this what he saw? My mind raced, trying to piece it together, but all I could feel was terror. The tower creaked, louder now, like something heavy was climbing. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't find us, but deep down, I knew it already had. The creaking stopped, and for a moment, I thought it was gone. Then a shadow passed over the window, slow and deliberate. My heart stopped. It was up here, on the platform's edge. Mara stifled a sob, and Theo grabbed the knife again, his knuckles white. I motioned for them to stay still, my own hands trembling. The shadow lingered, then vanished, but I could feel it. Whatever it was, it hadn't left. The air was thick with that rotten smell, so strong I gagged. I whispered we needed a plan, maybe signal for help, but we had no flares, no radio. The scary reality was clear. We were trapped, and something wanted us here. I grabbed the map, staring at the red circle. It marked a spot deeper in the forest, not far from the tower. Maybe it's a way out, I said, desperate for hope. Theo shook his head, saying it could be a trap, but Mara agreed with me. She wanted anything that wasn't staying here. We decided to wait until night, hoping the thing would move on, then make a run for the circled spot. It was a long shot, but we had nothing else. As we planned, a loud thud shook the tower, like something massive had jumped onto the roof. Dust rained down, and we froze, the horror sinking in. Whatever was out there wasn't just watching anymore. It was coming for us. The thud on the roof shook the tower, dust choking the air. My heart was in my throat as I grabbed Theo and Mara, pulling them close. The shadow outside was gone, but the rotten smell clung to everything, making my stomach turn. We crouched in the center of the platform, the logbook and that creepy map clutched in Mara's trembling hands. I whispered we couldn't wait anymore. Whatever was up there wasn't going to let us sit tight. Theo's eyes were wild, his grip on the broken knife blade shaky. We run for the map's circle, I said, pointing to the red mark. It was a gamble, but staying in this horror show tower was a death sentence. Mara nodded, her face pale but set. We had to move now. We grabbed our backpacks, stuffing in essentials, water, a flashlight, the map. The tower groaned like it was alive, and every creak felt like a countdown. I cracked open the door to the platform, peering down. The forest was pitch black, the moon barely cutting through the trees. No sign of that thing, but I knew it was out there, waiting. My hands shook as I led the way down the ladder, each step screaming under my weight. Theo followed. Then Mara, her breath hitching like she was holding back a scream. The ground felt unsteady, like the earth itself was part of this nightmare. We sprinted toward the jeep, hoping for a miracle, but it was still trashed, no keys in sight. The map's red circle pointed to a spot maybe a mile west, through dense woods. I took the lead, flashlight beam bouncing off gnarled trees. Theo kept muttering, "This is insane," but he stuck close. Mara clutched my sleeve, her eyes darting to every shadow. The forest was too quiet. No owls, no crickets, just our ragged breathing. Then we heard it, a low, guttural growl, same as before, but closer, behind us. My blood froze. I hissed for everyone to move faster, my legs burning as we crashed through branches. The scary thing was, I could feel it, whatever it was, keeping pace, just out of sight, like a predator toying with us. We stumbled into a clearing, the map's circled spot. It was a small ravine, overgrown with vines, and at its center, a stone slab covered in weird carvings, spirals, jagged lines, like something out of a horror movie. My stomach dropped. "This isn't a way out," Theo whispered, his voice breaking. Mara pointed to the slab, where fresh blood glistened. I gagged, the smell hitting me like a punch. We'd walked into a trap, and the realization was pure terror. Before I could speak, the growl came again, from all sides now, echoing through the trees. We backed against the slab, nowhere to run. Something moved in the shadows, tall, thin, its limbs bent at sickening angles. It didn't have a face, just a dark, hollow space where one should have been. My scream caught in my throat. Theo swung the knife, but his arm was shaking so bad it was useless. Mara grabbed my hand, whispering, "We have to move." I nodded, my mind racing for a way out. The thing stepped closer, its movements jerky, like a puppet on strings. I spotted a narrow path leading out of the ravine, barely visible. "There," I hissed, pulling them toward it. We ran, the thing's growl chasing us, growing louder, more guttural, like it was savoring the hunt. The path was a nightmare. Thorny vines tore at my arms, and my flashlight flickered, threatening to die. Theo tripped, cursing as he scrambled up, blood on his hands. Mara was sobbing but kept running, her grip on me like iron. The thing was close now. I could hear its steps, heavy and uneven, snapping branches. My lungs burned, but I pushed harder, the horror of being caught driving me. We burst into another clearing, an old ranger station, boarded up but solid. I slammed into the door, praying it'd give. It didn't. Theo threw his weight against it, and it cracked open, splinters flying. We piled inside, slamming it shut, my heart pounding so hard I thought it'd burst. Inside, the station was a wreck. Broken furniture, moldy papers, that same rotten smell. We shoved a desk against the door, our hands shaking. The growling stopped, but I knew it wasn't gone. Mara found a rusted axe in a corner, handing it to me with a look that said we weren't safe yet. I nodded, gripping it tight. Theo checked the windows, all boarded, but one had a gap. He peeked out and went pale. "It's right there," he whispered, pointing. I looked and saw it, standing just beyond the trees, motionless, its hollow face fixed on us. The disturbing truth hit me. It wasn't just hunting us, it was hurting us here. We searched the station for anything useful, a radio, a phone, anything. I found a trapdoor under a rug, leading to a basement. My gut screamed not to go down, but the thing outside thudded against the door, with splintering. We had no choice. I went first, axe in hand, the stairs creaking under me. The basement was dark, damp, and reeked of decay. My flashlight caught something, more carvings, like the ones on the slab, covering the walls. Mara gasped, pointing to a pile of clothes in the corner, a ranger's uniform, stained with blood. My hands shook as I realized we weren't escaping. We were walking deeper into this nightmare. The thudding above grew louder, the door cracking. I whispered for Theo and Mara to stay close. The basement had a tunnel, narrow and dripping with water, leading somewhere. Maybe out, maybe to hell. We didn't have time to think. The thing's growl filled the station, closer now, like it was inside. I pushed into the tunnel, axe raised, my heart hammering. The walls were tight, scraping my shoulders, and the air was so thick I could barely breathe. Mara's breathing was ragged behind me, Theo cursing under his breath. The scary part wasn't just the thing chasing us. It was the feeling that this tunnel, this whole place, was part of its plan. The tunnel was a claustrophobic nightmare, the walls slick with moss and something darker, like blood. My flashlight flickered, casting jagged shadows that made my heart skip. I gripped the axe, leading the way, every step echoing like a drum in my chest. Theo was right behind me, muttering about how we were screwed, while Mara's quiet sobs filled the space. The tunnel seemed endless, twisting deeper into the earth. That disturbing rotten smell was stronger here, choking me. I kept thinking about the ranger's logbook. It's watching. Can't leave. Was this where he ended up? The horror of it clawed at me, but I pushed forward, praying for a way out. We hit a fork in the tunnel, two paths branching off. One was wider, with faint light at the end. The other was narrow, pitch black, and reeked even worse. I hesitated, my gut screaming to take the lit path, but Mara pointed to scratches on the narrow one. Fresh, like the ones in the tower. "Maybe it's a sign," she whispered, her voice shaky. Theo argued for the wider path, saying light meant safety. I wasn't sure, something about the lit path felt too easy, like bait. My mistake was letting fear decide. "Wider one," I said, ignoring the dread in my chest. We moved fast, the growling behind us fading but never gone. The tunnel opened into a cavern, the air cold and damp. My flashlight caught more carvings on the walls, spirals, eyes, symbols that made my skin crawl. In the center was a pit, deep and dark, with bones scattered around it. Human, not animal. My stomach lurched. "We picked the wrong path," I whispered, realizing the horror too late. Theo cursed, kicking a rock into the pit. It didn't hit bottom. Mara grabbed my arm, pointing to the far wall, a faint outline of a door, rusted but real. Hope flickered, but then the growl came again, echoing from the tunnel we'd just left. The thing was close, and we'd walked right into its lair. I ran for the door, axe raised, and slammed it with my shoulder. It groaned, but didn't budge. Theo joined me, throwing his weight into it, while Mara kept watch, her eyes wide with terror. The growling grew louder, joined by heavy, uneven steps. I could feel it, those bent limbs, that hollow face, closing in. The door finally gave, screeching open to reveal a steep staircase leading up. We scrambled through, my heart pounding as I slammed it shut behind us. No lock, no barricade, just us and whatever was coming. The scary part was the silence that followed. Like the thing knew we had nowhere left to run. The stairs led to a small chamber, barely lit by cracks in the ceiling. It was a dead end, just stone walls and more carvings, these ones dripping with something dark and wet. My flashlight died, plunging us into near darkness. Mara screamed, and I spun around. Theo was gone. No sound, no struggle, just gone. I called his name, my voice echoing, but only the growl answered, low and close. Mara clung to me, sobbing, as I swung the axe blindly, hitting nothing but air. The horror hit me like a wave. We'd made a deadly mistake coming here, and now Theo was paying for it. I pulled Mara toward the wall, searching for any way out. My hands found a loose stone, and I pushed, desperate. It gave way, revealing a narrow crawl space. I shoved Mara through, following close, my shoulders scraping rock. The growl was right behind us now, so close I could feel its breath, cold, rancid, wrong. We crawled faster, the space tightening, my chest burning with panic. Mara was whimpering, saying Theo's name over and over. I wanted to scream that he was gone, but I couldn't. Guilt choked me. My decision to take the lit path had led us here, to this terrifying trap. The crawl space opened into the forest, the night air hitting us like a slap. We stumbled out, Hocking Hill's trees looming around us. The tower was visible in the distance, its silhouette mocking us. I thought we'd escaped, but then I heard it, a scream, Theo's, raw and desperate, coming from the direction of the cavern. My heart sank. Mara grabbed my arm, begging to go back, but I knew it was too late. The thing had him, and we'd led it right to us. I pulled her toward the trail, my legs shaking, the axe still in my hand. The forest was alive now, branches snapping, that growl echoing everywhere. We ran, tripping over roots, the horror of Theo's scream driving us. I kept thinking about that ranger, the bones, the carvings. How long had this thing been here, hunting? My lungs burned, but I didn't stop, dragging Mara with me. We reached the main road, empty and dark, no cars, no help. Mara collapsed, sobbing, saying it was her fault for suggesting the map. I wanted to tell her it was mine, for picking the wrong path, but the words wouldn't come. The growl was distant now, but I knew it wasn't done. We'd escaped, but at a cost. Theo was gone, and the terrifying truth was, this thing wasn't finished with us. I flagged down a truck hours later, my voice hoarse as I begged the driver for help. Mara was silent, her eyes hollow. We didn't talk about Theo, didn't mention the thing with no face. The driver took us to a ranger station, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd brought something with us. Back in Pittsburgh, I see those carvings in my dreams, hear Theo's scream. The map's still in my bag. I can't bring myself to burn it. Every night, I check my locks, my windows, waiting for that growl. The tragedy wasn't just losing Theo, it's knowing that thing is still out there, in Hocking Hills, waiting for the next fool to find that tower. I'm Nora Whitlock, 29 years old, from Columbus, Ohio. I'm a freelance photographer, always chasing the perfect shot to escape the city's noise. Hocking Hill State Park called to me after I found an old blog post about an abandoned fire lookout tower deep in the forest, perfect for a solo camping trip to clear my head. I loaded my trusty Jeep Wrangler with my camera, a tent, and enough supplies for a weekend, driving out with the windows down, blasting indie rock. The park's winding roads and thick pines felt like stepping into another world. By late afternoon, I parked at a trailhead, slung my backpack on, and hiked toward the tower, its rusted frame poking through the trees like a forgotten relic. The trail was overgrown, roots snagging my boots as I pushed deeper into the forest. My camera hung around my neck, snapping shots of twisted branches and mossy rocks. The air was sharp, smelling of earth and something faintly sour I couldn't place. The tower loomed ahead, its metal skeleton creaking in the wind. It was taller than I expected, maybe 60 feet, with a rickety ladder leading to a small platform. I climbed up, each step groaning like it might snap. The platform was bare, dusty planks, a cracked window, and a faint, disturbing smell like old meat. I set up my sleeping bag, figuring I'd sleep here instead of pitching my tent. Big mistake. I unpacked my gear, the forest's silence pressing in. No birds, no breeze, just an eerie stillness that made my skin prickle. I tried to shake it off, focusing on the view. Endless trees under a graying sky. My phone had no signal, but I wasn't worried. Solitude was the point. I cooked a quick meal on my camp stove, the hiss of the flame oddly loud. As dusk fell, the tower felt less like a refuge and more like a trap. I noticed scratches on the walls, deep and uneven, like something had clawed at them. Just weathering, I told myself, but my voice echoed weirdly. I laughed it off, snapping a photo of the marks for my blog, but the horror of being truly alone started creeping in. I decided to explore the tower's base before dark. The ladder creaked louder going down, and I swore I heard a faint thump from below, like something shifting. The ground was littered with leaves and broken glass, and I found an old sign half buried. Ranger Station 7, 1982. My flashlight caught something else, a rusted locket, chain snapped, lying in the dirt. I picked it up, my fingers brushing something sticky. The locket had a photo inside, faded but showing a young woman, her eyes scratched out. My stomach twisted. I shoved it in my pocket, telling myself it was just junk, but the scary feeling wouldn't quit. Back on the platform, I tried to settle in. The wind picked up, rattling the tower's frame. I wrapped myself in my sleeping bag, the scratches on the walls looking sharper in the dim light. I kept thinking about that locket, the scratched-out eyes. Who leaves something like that? I pulled out my notebook to jot down ideas for my blog, but my pen froze when I heard it, a low, rasping sound, like air leaking from somewhere below. I held my breath, listening. It stopped, then started again, closer. My heart raced. I told myself it was just the tower settling, but the disturbing noise felt alive, like it was searching for me. I grabbed my flashlight, aiming it at the trapdoor to the storage area below. The rasping stopped, but now I heard faint scratches, like nails on wood. My mind flashed to horror movies, stupid Nora, camping alone in a creepy tower. I laughed nervously, trying to calm down, but my hands were shaking. I decided to check the trapdoor, just to prove it was nothing. The bolt was rusted, but it slid open with a screech. The dark below swallowed my flashlight's beam, and that sour smell hit me harder, making me gag. I slammed the trapdoor shut, my pulse pounding. Whatever was down there, I didn't want to know, not yet. I stayed up, too wired to sleep, my flashlight trained on the trapdoor. The rasping came and went, each time closer, like something was testing me. I kept my knife close, a cheap thing I'd bought for camping, useless against anything real. Around midnight, I noticed my camera wasn't where I'd left it. I found it by the window, lens cap off, like someone had used it. My heart sank as I checked the photos. One new shot, blurry but showing the forest outside, with a tall, shadowy figure standing among the trees. My breath caught. I hadn't taken that. The horror of it hit me. I wasn't alone. I deleted the photo, my hands trembling, but the image burned into my brain. I told myself it was a glitch, a trick of the light, but deep down, I knew better. The tower's creaks grew louder, like it was warning me. I considered packing up and hiking out, but the forest at night felt like a death trap. My Jeep was a mile away, and I didn't trust my shaky legs to get me there. I decided to stay put, barricade the trapdoor with my backpack, and wait for dawn. The rasping started again, slower, almost mocking. I clutched my knife, staring at the trapdoor, praying it'd hold. Morning came, gray and cold, but I didn't feel safe. The rasping had stopped, but the air felt wrong, heavy with that sour smell. I checked my gear. My water bottle was empty, though I swore I'd filled it. My notebook had a new page, torn from somewhere, with a single word scrawled in shaky ink. Stay. My blood ran cold. I hadn't written it. I grabbed my stuff, ready to bolt, but the ladder outside looked different, bent, like something heavy had climbed it. The scary realization hit. Whatever was out there didn't just want me gone. It wanted me here, in this tower, for reasons I couldn't fathom. I woke up to a cold sweat, the tower's platform creaking under me. The word "stay" in my notebook burned in my mind, and that blurry photo of the shadowy figure kept flashing behind my eyes. My flashlight was dead, despite fresh batteries, and the sour smell was stronger, like something dead was close. I checked my gear. My water bottle was still empty, and now my camp stove wouldn't light. My stomach growled, but the thought of eating made me queasy. The forest outside was silent, no morning birds, just a heavy, scary stillness. I decided to hike to my Jeep and get out of here, but the ladder to the ground looked more bent, like something had climbed it again. My heart thudded as I grabbed my knife and backpack, ready to bolt. The ladder groaned louder than yesterday, each step feeling like a gamble. At the base, I noticed fresh scratches on the tower's legs, deep, like claw marks, but too precise for an animal. My breath caught. I told myself it was probably a bear, but bears don't climb towers, do they? I started down the trail toward the Jeep, my boots crunching on leaves. The forest felt different, the trees leaning in, their branches like fingers. My camera bounced against my chest, and I regretted bringing it. Every snap felt like it was drawing attention. Halfway to the Jeep, I found my water bottle, full now, sitting upright on a stump. I hadn't left it there. The disturbing realization hit. Someone, or something, was messing with me. I grabbed the bottle, my hands shaking, and kept moving. The trail seemed longer, twistier, like it was playing tricks. My map was useless. The path I'd marked was gone, replaced by a scribbled line leading back to the tower. My pulse raced. I tossed the map, relying on memory, but the forest felt alive, watching. I heard a faint rasp, like the one from last night, coming from the trees to my left. I froze, gripping my knife, but saw nothing, just shadows shifting in ways they shouldn't. The scary part was how deliberate it felt, like whatever was out there was toying with me. I pushed forward, telling myself I'd be fine once I reached the Jeep. When I finally saw my Jeep, relief hit, then vanished. The driver's door was open, the seat slashed, stuffing spilling out like guts. My keys were gone from my pocket, and I swore I'd kept them close. I searched the ground, my hands digging through dirt, but found nothing. Instead, I spotted another locket, identical to the one I'd found, lying in the passenger seat. Its photo was the same woman, eyes scratched out, but this time, the word "mine" was carved into the metal. My stomach lurched. The horror of it sank in. This wasn't random. I backed away, my eyes scanning the trees, feeling eyes on me from every direction. I decided to head back to the tower, hating every step. Staying out here felt like walking into a trap, but the tower was my only shelter. The trail back was even weirder. My footprints from earlier were gone, replaced by those same barefoot, oversized tracks I'd seen before. They led straight to the tower. My heart pounded as I climbed the ladder, the metal creaking like it was screaming. Back on the platform, I barricaded the trapdoor with my backpack, but it felt pointless. The sour smell was choking now, and I noticed my sleeping bag was moved, unzipped, like someone had been in it. I clutched my knife, my mind racing. Was this thing already inside? I searched the platform for anything useful, a radio, a flare, anything. In a corner, I found an old journal, its pages brittle, stamped, Hocking Hills Ranger Log, 1981. The last entry, in frantic handwriting, read, "She won't let me leave. She's in the walls." My blood ran cold. She? The Lockett's woman? I shoved the journal in my bag, my hands trembling. The rasping started again, louder, from the storage area below. I backed against the wall, knife raised, my breath shallow. The trapdoor rattled, just once, like something was testing it. The disturbing thought hit me. Whatever was down there knew I was here, alone. I decided to stay put until dawn, hoping daylight would scare it off. I piled more gear against the trapdoor, my arms aching. The rasping stopped, but now I heard whispers, soft, garbled, like a voice underwater. They came from the walls, the floor, everywhere. I told myself it was the wind, but there was no wind. I checked my camera again, my fingers fumbling. Another new photo. Me, sleeping on the platform, taken from above. My heart stopped. I hadn't set a timer, hadn't left the camera up there. The horror of it was clear. Something was in the tower with me, watching, waiting. I gripped my knife tighter, my eyes locked on the trapdoor. The whispers grew louder, forming words I couldn't make out, like a chant. I felt dizzy, the air thick with that sour smell. I noticed a new scratch on the wall, fresh, spelling stay again, the letters jagged and deep. My legs shook as I realized I'd made a mistake coming back here. I should have run, signal for help, anything but return to this trap. The trapdoor rattled again, harder, and I heard a laugh. Low, feminine, wrong. My skin crawled. I grabbed the locket from my pocket, staring at the scratched-out face, and it hit me. This wasn't just a thing. It was her, whoever she was, and she wanted me here for something terrifying. I sat against the wall, knife in one hand, locket in the other, my heart hammering. The whispers stopped, but the silence was worse, like the calm before a storm. I kept thinking about that journal entry. She's in the walls. Was she really? My flashlight was dead, my phone useless, and the tower felt smaller, like it was closing in. I decided to make a break for it at first light, no matter what. But as I planned, the trapdoor shook violently, with splintering. My breath caught. Something was coming up, and I had nowhere to hide. The scary truth was sinking in. I wasn't just trapped in this tower, I was hers. The trapdoor's splintering jolt snapped me upright, my knife shaking in my hand. The tower's platform was dark, the sour smell so thick I could taste it. That feminine laugh echoed again, low and mocking, coming from below. My heart pounded as I backed against the wall, staring at the trapdoor. The whispers started up, sharper now, chanting stay, 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 like a twisted lullaby. I gripped the locket, its scratched-out face burning in my mind. The horror of it hit hard. Whatever this she was here, in the tower, and she wasn't just watching anymore. I shoved my backpack tighter against the trapdoor, but it rattled again, harder, like something was clawing its way up. I grabbed the journal I'd found, flipping through it for clues. The pages were filled with frantic scrawls. Dates from 1981, mentions of a woman in the woods who took rangers who strayed too far. She marks you. One entry read, and my stomach dropped. Thinking of the locket, the word mine. My flashlight was dead, but moonlight caught something on the wall, a shadow, tall and thin, moving across the glass. I froze, my breath shallow. It wasn't outside, it was inside, behind me. The scary realization sank in. She was on the platform with me, and I hadn't even heard her come up. I spun around, knife raised, but saw nothing. Just the empty platform, my gear scattered. The air felt wrong, heavy, like it was pressing me down. The whispers stopped, replaced by a faint hum, like a voice singing underwater. I checked the trapdoor, still barricaded, but the wood was cracked, splinters fresh. My hands shook as I grabbed my camera, hoping for proof I wasn't losing it. The screen showed a new photo, me, standing by the window, but my eyes were scratched out, just like the locket's photo. My blood ran cold. The disturbing truth was clear. She wasn't just haunting this tower. She was targeting me. I decided to check the storage area, desperate for answers. The trapdoor creaked as I moved my backpack, the sour smell choking me. I climbed down, knife in one hand, the journal in the other. The storage room was darker than before, the air icy. My dead flashlight left me blind, but I felt her. Eyes on me, her presence like a weight. I tripped over something soft, like fabric. My hands found it, a ranger's jacket, blood-soaked, with a name tag, E. Harrow. The horror hit. Another victim, maybe recent. The humming grew louder, coming from the walls now, vibrating in my chest. I scrambled back to the ladder, my heart racing. Something brushed my arm, cold, like fingers made of mist. I yelped, swinging my knife, hitting nothing. The humming turned into a laugh, sharp and cruel, echoing from every corner. I climbed faster, the ladder shaking like it might collapse. Back on the platform, I slammed the trapdoor shut, piling everything I had against it. Backpack, sleeping bag, even my camera. The laugh stopped, but I heard footsteps now, slow and deliberate, circling the tower outside. The scary part wasn't just her presence. It was how she knew my every move, like she was inside my head. I grabbed the locket again, my hands trembling. The photo inside had changed. The woman's face was clearer, her eyes gone, just black pits staring back. My reflection in the glass showed the same. My eyes looked wrong, shadowed, like hers. I dropped the locket, backing away. The journal mentioned a mark that trapped you, made you hers. Was that what the locket was? My mind raced, piecing it together. The whispers started again, louder, chanting my name now. Nora, Nora, stay. The horror of it was suffocating. She wasn't just haunting me. She was claiming me, and I brought her locket right to her. I decided to signal for help, anything to get out. I tore up my notebook, writing help on the pages, planning to toss them out the window. But the glass was scratched now, fresh marks spelling mine in jagged lines. My breath hitched. I threw the pages anyway, watching them flutter into the dark. The footsteps outside stopped, and for a moment, I thought it worked. Then the tower shook, a loud thud from the roof, like something heavy landed. Dust rained down, and the humming became a scream, high and piercing. I covered my ears, my knife clattering to the floor. The disturbing feeling grew. She was done playing. I grabbed the journal, searching for a way to fight her. One entry mentioned a fire, rangers burning something in the woods to stop her, but it failed. My camp stove was broken, but I had matches. Could I burn the locket? The idea felt like a long shot, but I was desperate. The screaming stopped, replaced by a low growl, like an animal, but worse. I looked out the window and saw her, tall, thin, her face a void, standing just beyond the trees. My heart stopped. She didn't move, just stared, her presence a terrifying weight. I clutched the matches, my hands shaking, knowing I had to act fast. The trapdoor rattled again, with splintering. I grabbed my knife, my pulse pounding. The growl was inside now, coming from below, and the air felt electric, like a storm about to break. I realized my mistake, coming back to the tower, keeping the locket, thinking I could outsmart her. The journal slipped from my hands, pages scattering, and I saw a new entry, not there before. Nora, you're mine. My scream caught in my throat. The tower's walls seemed to pulse, the scratches glowing faintly. The horror was undeniable. She wasn't just in the tower. She was the tower, and I was trapped in her grip. The tower shook as the trapdoor splintered, the growl vibrating through the floorboards. My knife trembled in my hand, the locket's weight burning in my pocket. The air was thick with that sour, rotten smell, and the scratches on the walls glowed faintly, pulsing like a heartbeat. I grabbed the matches, my only shot at burning the locket to maybe stop her. The journal's talk of fire gave me hope, but the horror of her presence, her void face, her chanting voice, made my legs weak. I had to get out now. I shoved my backpack aside, the trapdoor rattling harder, and bolted for the ladder outside, praying it'd hold. The forest was pitch black, but staying in this terrifying tower wasn't an option. I climbed down, the ladder creaking like it was screaming. Halfway, I felt it, a cold, misty touch on my ankle, like fingers wrapping around. I yelped, nearly falling, and kicked free, my heart hammering. The ground was soft, littered with leaves, but those oversized barefoot tracks were everywhere, circling the tower. I ran toward the trail to my jeep, clutching the locket and matches, my knife tucked in my belt. The forest was alive with whispers, chanting my name. Nora, stay. My flashlight was dead, but the scratches glow from the tower lit my path, a disturbing beacon. I tripped over a root, scraping my hands, but kept running, the growl chasing me through the trees. The trail twisted, longer than it should have been, like the forest was shifting. I heard her laugh, sharp, feminine, slicing through the silence. My chest burned, but I pushed harder, the jeep's shape finally appearing through the trees. Relief hit, then vanished. The doors were wide open, tires slashed, windows cracked. My keys were still gone, and the word mine was scratched into the hood, deep and jagged. My stomach lurched. The scary truth sank in. She wasn't letting me leave. I fumbled with the matches, deciding to burn the locket right there. I struck one, the flame weak, but before I could light it, the growl came from behind, so close I felt her breath. Cold, rancid. I spun, knife raised, and saw her, tall, thin, her void face inches from mine. I screamed, swinging wildly, but she vanished, her laugh echoing. I dropped the locket, the match burning my fingers. I grabbed it again, my hands shaking, and ran deeper into the woods, away from the jeep, toward a clearing I remembered from the map. The forest seemed to fight me. Branches snagged my clothes, roots tripped me. The whispers grew louder, chanting, "Stay, mine, stay." The horror was suffocating. She was everywhere, in the trees, the air, my head. I clutched the locket, my only hope, praying fire would end this. The clearing was small, a ring of stones like an old fire pit. I knelt, striking another match, my hands trembling so bad I could barely hold it. The locket's metal was cold, unnatural, as I held the flame to it. The photo inside curled, blackening, but then the flame went out, like she'd snuffed it. The growl returned, circling me, and I saw her again. Multiple shapes now, all void-faced, closing in. My heart stopped. I scrambled back, dropping the locket, and ran for a narrow path leading out of the clearing. The path was overgrown, thorns tearing my skin, but I didn't stop. The terrifying realization hit. Burning the locket wasn't enough. She was stronger than that. I stumbled into a ravine, the ground slick with mud. The growl was everywhere, her shapes flickering in the trees. I spotted a cave, barely visible, and dove inside, hoping to hide. The air was damp, reeking of that sour smell, and the walls were covered in carvings, spirals, eyes, like the ones in the tower. My breath hitched. This wasn't a refuge, it was her place. I clutched my knife, backing deeper, my boots slipping. The whispers filled the cave, chanting my name, and I saw her, standing at the entrance, her void face tilting like she was studying me. The horror was clear. I'd run right into her trap, and she was done toying with me. The cave was tight, the carvings glowing faintly, like they were alive. I found a crevice, barely wide enough to squeeze through, and crawled in, my shoulders scraping rock. The growl followed, closer, her cold breath on my neck. My knife caught on the wall, snapping the blade. I cursed, my hands shaking as I pushed deeper, the crevice narrowing. The whispers became screams, high and piercing, rattling my skull. I saw light ahead, a way out maybe. I crawled faster, my chest tight, the terrifying weight of her presence crushing me. The crevice opened into a small chamber, and I stumbled out, gasping, thinking I'd escaped. Then I saw it, a pile of bones, human, with a ranger's hat on top. I froze, my heart pounding. The hat had a name tag, E. Harrow, same as the jacket in the tower. My mind raced. How many had she taken? The chamber had no exit, just walls of glowing carvings, pulsing like a heartbeat. I struck another match, desperate to burn something, anything, to fight her. The locket was still in my hand, and I lit it again, the flame catching this time. The photo screamed, a sound no human could make, as it burned. The growl turned into a shriek, shaking the cave. I thought I'd won, but the scary truth hit. Burning the locket only made her angrier, and now she was everywhere, her void face filling the dark. I backed against the wall, the match dying, the carvings glowing brighter. The air was electric, like a storm about to break. I heard footsteps, hers, slow, deliberate, coming from the crevice. My heart sank. I'd made it this far, but the horror was undeniable. There was no escape, not from her. I clutched the burned locket, its metal hot, and braced myself, knowing she was coming. The chamber felt smaller, the walls closing in, her whispers now a roar in my ears. I'd fought to get out, but every step had led me deeper into her grip, and now I was hers. The footsteps stopped, but her presence filled the chamber, heavy and suffocating. The burned locket was still in my hand, its metal searing my palm, but I couldn't let go. The carvings pulsed faster, their glow blinding, and the sour smell was so thick I gagged. My mind raced, replaying every choice, coming to Hocking Hills, keeping the locket, crawling into this cave. My biggest mistake was thinking I could fight her. The journal's warning, "She marks you," echoed in my head. The horror of it sank in. The locket wasn't just a trinket. It was her claim on me, and burning it had only sealed my fate. I pressed against the wall, my breath shallow, waiting for her to strike. The air shifted, and I saw her, her void face inches from mine, her body flickering like a bad signal. I screamed, but no sound came, my voice stolen. Her cold, misty fingers brushed my face, and my vision blurred, my eyes burning like they were being scratched out. I clawed at the wall, finding a loose stone, and pushed, desperate for a way out. It gave, revealing a tunnel, narrow and dripping with water. I crawled in, my body aching, her whispers chasing me. Nora, mine stay. The terrifying realization hit. Every move I made was part of her game, and I was playing right into it. The tunnel was tight, the walls scraping my skin raw. The carvings followed, glowing faintly, guiding me deeper. My hands found something soft, another ranger's jacket, blood-soaked, with a photo tucked inside. It was me, my eyes scratched out, taken in the tower while I slept. My heart stopped. She'd been with me from the start, watching, marking me. I dropped the photo, crawling faster, the tunnel sloping down. The whispers became a scream, her voice tearing through my skull. I saw a light ahead, faint but real, and pushed toward it, praying it was freedom. The horror was crushing. Even if I got out, she was part of me now. The tunnel opened into a forest clearing, the tower's silhouette looming in the distance. I stumbled out, gasping, the night air cold on my torn skin. The locket was still in my hand, charred but intact, like it couldn't be destroyed. I threw it into the dirt, but the ground shook, her laugh echoing from everywhere. I ran, my legs burning, toward the main trail, hoping to find the road. The forest fought me, branches snapped, roots tripped me, her void face flickering in the trees. My mistake was clear. I'd thought escaping the cave meant escaping her, but she was the forest, the tower, everything. The scary truth was, I'd never been alone. I reached the trailhead, my jeep a wrecked shadow in the dark. I collapsed, my hands bloody, my vision fading. Her whispers filled my head, chanting mine over and over. I saw her again, standing over me, her void face tilting like she was smiling. My eyes burned, and I felt it, my vision darkening, like she was scratching me out. I screamed, but the sound was hers, not mine. I'd made a deadly mistake keeping the locket, coming here, thinking I could outrun her. The tragedy wasn't just my fate. It was knowing she'd take others, anyone who found that tower, her mark waiting in the dark. I woke in a hospital, a hiker having found me on the road, barely alive. My camera was gone, my gear lost, but the locket was in my pocket, unburned, like it had never left. My eyes don't work right anymore. Everything's blurry, like I'm seeing through her void. The doctors say it's trauma, but I know better. Back in Columbus, I lock my doors, check my windows, but her whispers follow, faint but constant. I see her in mirrors, in shadows, her face my own now. The horror lingers. I escaped Hocking Hills, but not her. She's still with me, waiting, and I know she'll never let go. I tried burning the locket again, but it won't catch fire. I buried it in my backyard, but the next day, it was on my kitchen table. I don't sleep much, afraid of what I'll see when I close my eyes. The journal's words haunt me. She marks you. I was marked the moment I picked up that locket, and now I'm hers, forever. I've thought about going back to Hocking Hills, finding that tower, burning it down, but I know it won't help. The terrifying truth is, she's not just in the forest, she's in me, in every shadow, every dream. I'm alive, but it's no victory, it's a curse. I keep the locket hidden now, locked in a box, but I hear it sometimes, whispering my name. I've stopped taking photos, stopped leaving the house. The world feels like her domain, every dark corner a trap. I told a friend about it once, but he laughed, saying it was just a bad trip. I wish he was right. The tragedy is, I'll never know peace again. She's waiting, always, and I can feel her eyes, her void, watching me. I'm marked, and Hocking Hills was just the start. Others will find that tower, her locket, and she'll claim them too, one by one. I dream of the tower every night, its rusted frame creaking, her void face in the windows. Sometimes I see myself, eyes scratched out, standing in the forest, chanting stay. I wake up screaming, my hands clutching the locket, though I swear I locked it away. The horror of it is endless. I escaped, but I didn't. She's part of me now, her mark deeper than skin. I've thought about warning others, posting online about Hocking Hills, but who'd believe me? The locket's whisper grows louder each day, and I know the truth. I'll never be free, and neither will anyone who steps into her woods. I'm Gideon Holt, 34 years old, from Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm a high school history teacher, always craving a break from grading papers. My friend's Lila, a 31-year-old barista with a thing for ghost stories, and her brother Vance, a 29-year-old landscaper who's all bravado, talked me into a camping trip in Hocking Hills State Park. Lila found a post on some creepy forum about an abandoned fire lookout tower, perfect for a spooky weekend. I packed my old Jeep Gladiator with gear, beer, and Lila's ridiculous Ouija board, and we hit the road, joking about horror movies. The park's dense forest swallowed us as we arrived, the tower's rusted frame poking through the trees like a bad omen. The trail to the tower was muddy, our boots slipping as we hauled our stuff. Lila kept snapping photos, saying the place was haunted as hell. Vance scoffed, but I caught him glancing at the trees, uneasy. The air was thick, smelling of pine and something sharp, like rust. The tower was a wreck, peeling paint, a wobbly ladder, and a platform that looked ready to collapse. We climbed up, the metal groaning like it was pissed we were there. Inside, it was dusty, with cracked windows and a faint, disturbing whiff of something foul. We set up sleeping bags, laughing to shake off the creepy vibe, but my gut was already nodding. I noticed weird marks on the floor, long, thin scratches, like something had been dragged. Probably old gear, Vance said, but his voice was tight. Lila pointed out a rusted tin can in a corner, stamped "Property of Hocking Hills, 1978. It felt like a relic from a ghost story, and Lila's grin was all mischief. We cooked dinner on a camp stove, the flames casting jittery shadows. The forest was too quiet. No crickets, no wind, just a heavy silence that made my skin crawl. I kept glancing at the windows, expecting a face, but saw only darkness. The horror of being so isolated was starting to sink in. We decided to explore the tower's base before night fell. The ladder creaked louder going down, and I swore I heard a faint hum, like a voice carried on the wind. At the bottom, we found a pile of rocks arranged in a circle, too neat to be natural. Lila said it looked like a ritual site, half joking, but Vance kicked a rock, muttering about hippie crap. I spotted something glinting in the dirt, a brass key, old and tarnished, with HHR etched on it. I pocketed it, thinking it might be useful, but the scary feeling it gave me was hard to shake. The forest seemed to watch us, the trees too still. Back on the platform, we tried to lighten the mood. Lila pulled out her Ouija board, insisting we talk to the spirits. Vance rolled his eyes but played along, his tough guy act slipping. I wasn't into it, but I joined, my hands sweaty on the planchette. We asked dumb questions, laughing when it moved, blaming each other. Then it spelled leave, slow and deliberate. Lila gasped, Vance cursed, and I tried to laugh it off, but my heart was racing. The disturbing part was how the air changed, colder, heavier, like something was listening. We shoved the board away, but the tower's creaks got louder, like it was waking up. I suggested we check the storage area below, maybe find a lock for that key. The trapdoor was stuck, but Vance pried it open, the hinges screaming. The air down there was damp, reeking of that foul smell, stronger now. My flashlight caught stacks of old crates, some broken, and a pile of papers, yellowed and crumbling. I found a ranger's log, the last entry dated 1978. It's here. Won't let us go. My stomach twisted. Lila grabbed my arm, pointing to a corner, a pile of clothes, stained and torn, with a name tag. H. Reed, Ranger. The horror hit. We weren't alone in this tower, and whatever was here had history. We climbed back up, the ladder shaking like it might snap. On the platform, we sat in silence, the log's words echoing in my head. Lila kept muttering about the Ouija board, saying we'd pissed something off. Vance tried to play it cool, but his hands were shaking as he cracked a beer. I checked the key in my pocket, its weight unsettling. The tower's walls seemed to lean in, the scratches on the floor sharper in the dim light. I noticed my Jeep keys were missing from my bag. I tore through my stuff, panic rising, but they were gone. The scary realization hit. Someone, or something, had taken them. We decided to search the platform for the keys, hoping they'd fallen. Lila found a photo under her sleeping bag, old, faded, showing a ranger with a blank, eerie smile. The back read, H. Reed, 1978. My blood ran cold. Vance said it was just junk, but his voice cracked. The foul smell was stronger now, like it was seeping from the walls. I suggested checking the Jeep. Maybe the keys were there, but the thought of going outside made my skin crawl. The forest was too dark, too quiet, like it was holding its breath. As we planned, A low hum started, like the one I'd heard earlier, but clearer, almost words. It came from below, and the trapdoor rattled, just once. I grabbed my flashlight, my hands sweaty, and aimed it at the trapdoor. The hum stopped, but now I heard scratches, slow, deliberate, like nails dragging across wood. Lila's eyes were wide, Vance's bravado gone. I tried to stay calm, saying it was probably an animal, but deep down, I knew better. The tower felt alive, its creaks like whispers, warning us. I clutched the brass key, wondering if it unlocked something we didn't want to find. The disturbing truth was sinking in. We'd stumbled into something old, something angry, and it wasn't just the tower. It was the whole damn forest, and it wanted us here. The tower's platform felt like a cage as night settled in, the scratches on the floor glinting in the moonlight. My Jeep keys were still missing, and that brass key with HHR etched on it weighed heavy in my pocket. Lila was freaking out about the Ouija board, swearing we'd opened a door. Vance told her to chill, but his eyes kept darting to the trapdoor, where the hum was louder now, almost words. The foul smell was worse, like rotting meat, making my stomach churn. I suggested we search the Jeep again at dawn, but the idea of going outside felt like walking into a horror movie. The forest was too quiet, the air too thick, and the disturbing feeling that something was watching us wouldn't quit. We tried to sleep, but every creak of the tower jolted us awake. Around 2 a.m., Lila gasped, pointing to the window. A faint glow moved through the trees, slow, like a lantern swaying. My heart raced. Probably a hiker, Vance muttered, but his voice was shaky. I grabbed my flashlight, aiming it outside, but the glow vanished. The hum started again, clearer, chanting "stay" in a low, raspy tone. I told myself it was the wind, but my hands were trembling. Lila clutched the ranger's photo, her knuckles white. "We shouldn't have touched that board," she whispered. The scary truth was sinking in. Whatever was out there wasn't human, and it knew we were here. I decided we needed to check the storage area again, maybe find a clue about my keys or that brass one. Vance argued it was a bad idea, but Lila backed me, saying we couldn't just sit here. The trapdoor creaked as we opened it, the foul smell hitting like a punch. I went first, flashlight shaking, the beam catching more scratches on the walls, fresh, deep, spelling leave in jagged lines. My blood ran cold. Vance cursed, backing up, but Lila grabbed a crumpled paper from the floor, a map, old and torn, with a red X marked deep in the forest. The horror of it hit. Someone, or something, wanted us to find this, like it was bait. We climbed back up, the ladder groaning louder, like it was warning us. On the platform, Lila spread the map out, her hands shaking. The X was near a place called Crow's Hollow, a name I didn't like one bit. Vance said we should hike to the main road, get help, but Lila pointed out it was miles away, and we had no keys. My phone was dead, no signal anyway. The hum turned into whispers now, circling the tower, saying our names: Gideon, Lila, Vance. My skin crawled. I suggested burning the map, thinking it might stop whatever was happening, but Lila refused, saying it was our only lead. Big mistake, letting her keep it. We barricaded the trapdoor with our gear, but it felt pointless. The whispers grew louder, weaving into a chant that made my head throb. I noticed my backpack was unzipped, my water bottle gone. "This is messed up," Vance said, his tough guy act crumbling. I checked the brass key again, noticing it was warm now, like it had been held. The disturbing idea hit. Whatever was here was touching our stuff, moving things, playing with us. Lila found another photo under her sleeping bag. Same ranger, H. Reed, but his face was scratched out now, like the locket Nora found in that other story I'd heard about Hocking Hills. My heart sank. Was this the same thing? We decided to stay awake, taking turns watching the trapdoor. Vance went first, gripping a broken crate piece like a club. Lila kept rereading the ranger's log, muttering about it not letting people go. I tried to stay calm, but the tower's creaks were like footsteps now, pacing above us. Around 3 a.m., the glow returned outside, brighter, closer, hovering near the tower's base. I peered out, my breath fogging the glass, and saw it. A shape, tall and blurry, holding the glow like a lantern. The scary part wasn't just seeing it. It was how it stood still, like it was waiting for us to come down. I whispered to Vance and Lila, pointing out the shape. Vance's face went pale, and Lila clutched the map like a lifeline. "We need to go to Crow's Hollow," she said, her voice desperate. I argued it was a trap, but Vance sided with her, saying we couldn't stay here. My gut screamed to wait for daylight, but their panic was contagious. I grabbed the brass key, thinking it might unlock something at the X. The whispers stopped, replaced by a low laugh, deep, wrong, coming from the trapdoor. My pulse raced. We were making a mistake, but we packed our bags, ready to move at first light, not knowing we were walking right into its plan. The tower shook, a loud thud from the roof, dust raining down. We froze, staring up. The laugh came again, louder, like it was inside the walls. I noticed the Ouija board was gone, not where we'd left it. My flashlight caught something on the floor. New scratches, spelling come. My stomach dropped. The horror was clear. Whatever was out there wasn't just watching. It was calling us, pulling us toward Crow's Hollow. I clutched the key, its warmth burning my hand, and realized we'd messed up by touching it, by staying here, by thinking we could outsmart this thing. The forest outside was silent, but I knew it was waiting. We sat huddled together, the map between us, the glow outside pulsing like a heartbeat. Lila kept saying the X was our way out, but I wasn't so sure. Vance checked the window, his hands shaking, and whispered, "It's closer." The shape was at the tower's base now, its glow casting long shadows through the cracks. The air felt electric, like a storm about to break. I suggested we burn the ranger's photo, maybe break whatever hold this thing had, but Lila refused, saying it was evidence. The disturbing truth was sinking in. We were trapped, not just by the tower, but by our own choices, and something was coming for us. The tower's platform was a pressure cooker, the air thick with that foul, rotting smell. The glow outside pulsed brighter, the shape at the tower's base now a tall, blurry figure, its edges wrong, like it was fraying into the dark. My heart pounded as I clutched the brass key, its unnatural warmth searing my palm. Lila was glued to the map, muttering about Crow's Hollow, while Vance gripped his makeshift club, his bravado gone. The scratches spelling come on the floor seemed to glow faintly, and the low laugh from the trapdoor turned my blood to ice. The horror hit hard. This thing wasn't just haunting us, it was hunting us, and we'd been dumb enough to play its game with that Ouija board. The trapdoor rattled, with splintering, and the laugh became a growl, deep and guttural. I yanked Lila back, shouting for Vance to help me barricade it. We piled more gear on, but the door bucked like something massive was pushing up. My flashlight flickered, catching new scratches on the walls, mine now carved deep. Lila's eyes were wide, clutching the ranger's photo like it could save her. "We pissed it off," she whispered, her voice breaking. I wanted to argue, but the scary truth was clear. We'd invited this thing in, and it wasn't letting us go. The glow outside moved, circling the tower, its light bleeding through the cracks. I grabbed the ranger's log, desperate for answers. The pages were frantic, entries from 1978 about a watcher in the woods, something that marked people with keys. My stomach dropped, the brass key in my hand. "We need to ditch this thing," I said, but Lila shook her head, saying it might unlock something at Crow's Hollow. Vance snapped, saying we should burn it, but my hands wouldn't let go, like the key was part of me. The growl grew louder, shaking the tower, and I heard footsteps, heavy, uneven, climbing the ladder outside. The horror was suffocating. It was here, and we were trapped. We backed against the wall, the trapdoor still rattling. My flashlight died, plunging us into near darkness, the glow outside our only light. Lila pointed to the window, her voice a hiss. "It's up here." I looked and froze. A figure, tall and thin, stood on the platform's edge, its face a dark smudge, like it was erased. My scream caught in my throat. Vance swung his club at the window, shattering it, but the figure was gone, its laugh echoing in the wind. The disturbing realization hit. It wasn't just outside, it was inside, everywhere, playing with us like prey. The air felt alive, buzzing with its presence. I suggested burning the map, breaking whatever hold it had, but Lila clutched it tighter, saying it was our only way out. Vance cursed her, saying she was obsessed, and they started arguing, their voices loud enough to drown out the growl. Big mistake, dividing us made us weaker. I tried to calm them, but the tower shook again, a loud thud from the roof. Dust rained down, and the scratches on the walls pulsed, spelling new words. "You're mine." My heart stopped. The scary part wasn't just the figure. It was how it knew us, our fears, our names, like it was inside our heads. I grabbed the brass key, thinking to throw it out the broken window, but it burned my hand, leaving a red mark. Lila gasped, pointing to my palm. "A faint spiral, like the carvings in the lock." "It marked you," she whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Vance backed away, like I was cursed. The growl was inside now, coming from the trapdoor, the walls, the roof. I heard whispers again, chanting our names, and saw shadows moving in the corners, too fast to track. The terrifying truth sank in. This thing wasn't just a ghost. It was something older, hungrier, and we'd walked right into its lair. We decided to make a run for Crow's Hollow, hoping the map's X held answers. I regretted letting Lila keep it, but we had no other plan. We grabbed our bags, leaving the Ouija board behind, its planchette now missing. The ladder outside was our only way down, but the figure's glow was brighter, waiting at the base. My pulse raced as we climbed, the metal creaking like it might snap. Halfway down, I felt it, a cold, wet touch on my neck, like a hand. I yelped, nearly falling, and Vance shouted to keep moving. The disturbing part was how real it felt, like the thing was tasting me, marking me deeper. We hit the ground, the forest swallowing us. The glow followed, weaving through the trees, its light casting twisted shadows. Lila led with the map, her hands shaking, while Vance stayed close, his club raised. The whispers were louder, chanting, "Come, mine, come." I clutched the key, its burn throbbing in my palm. The trail to Crow's Hollow was narrow, overgrown, and felt wrong, like the forest was guiding us. The horror grew with every step. We were following the map, but it was leading us to the thing, not away. My mistake was not burning that key when I had the chance. We reached a clearing, the map's X marking a stone circle, like the one by the tower but bigger, with carvings, spirals, eyes, jagged lines. In the center was a rusted lockbox, the brass key's perfect match. Lila insisted we open it, but Vance grabbed my arm, saying it was a trap. The glow was everywhere now, the figure's shape flickering in the trees, its smudged face watching. The growl shook the ground, and I realized the terrifying truth. We weren't escaping. We were delivering ourselves to it, and the key in my hand was the final piece of its plan. The stone circle in Crow's Hollow pulsed with the figure's glow, its smudged face flickering in the trees. My hand burned from the brass key, the spiral mark on my palm throbbing. Lila clutched the map, insisting we open the rusted lockbox at the circle's center, but Vance's eyes were wild, saying it was a death trap. The growl shook the ground, the whispers chanting mine in our ears. My heart pounded as I realized the horror. We'd followed the map right to this thing's lair. I wanted to run, but the forest felt like a maze, closing in. Against my gut, I slid the key into the lockbox, the click loud in the silence. The lid creaked open, revealing a black void inside, and the scary truth hit. This wasn't escape, it was a summons. A cold wind blasted from the lockbox, the growl turning into a scream that rattled my bones. Lila dropped the map, backing away, but Vance grabbed my arm, shouting to run. The figure was everywhere now, its smudged face multiplying, surrounding the circle. I stumbled, the key falling into the box, and the ground shook harder, like something was waking up. We sprinted toward the trees, branches tearing at us, the whispers now a deafening roar. My lungs burned, but the terrifying feeling of being hunted drove me forward. Lila tripped, her camera shattering, and I pulled her up, her face pale with horror. The forest seemed to twist, paths vanishing, leading us back toward the tower. We ran blindly, the glow chasing us, its light warping the trees into claws. Vance was ahead, his club useless against the shadows closing in. I heard a snap, like bone breaking, and Vance screamed, his voice cut off. I spun around. He was gone, just his club lying in the dirt. Lila sobbed, clutching my arm, but I dragged her forward, my heart breaking. The scary part wasn't just losing Vance, it was knowing we'd led him here, following that damn map. The tower loomed ahead, its rusted frame glowing faintly, like it was calling us back. My mistake was opening that lockbox, thinking it held answers, but it only unleashed her. We reached the tower, The latter our only shot. I pushed Lila up first, her hands slipping on the rungs. The glow was closer, the figure's smudged face inches from the ground below. I climbed, my hands burning from the spiral mark, the metal creaking like it might collapse. On the platform, we slammed the trapdoor shut, piling gear on it. But the growl was inside now, vibrating the walls. Lila's eyes were wide, muttering about the Ouija board, how we'd invited this. The horror sank in. The tower wasn't a refuge. It was her domain, and we'd walked right back into it, trapped like flies. The platform shook, scratches appearing on the walls, spelling mine over and over. I grabbed the ranger's log, hoping for a clue, but the pages were blank now, except for one line. She takes what's hers. My stomach dropped. Lila found a rusted crowbar in a corner, handing it to me with trembling hands. The trapdoor buckled, with splintering, and the glow seeped through the cracks, blinding. I swung the crowbar at the door, desperate to keep her out, but the terrifying truth was clear. She was already here, in the air, the walls, us. The whispers screamed our names, and I felt her cold touch on my neck, like fingers made of ice. We decided to make a stand, no more running. I suggested burning the log, maybe breaking her hold, but Lila shook her head, saying we needed to find Vance. My heart sank. She didn't get it. He was gone. The platform's windows shattered, glass flying, the glow flooding in. The figure stood outside, its smudged face tilting, like it was smiling. Lila screamed, swinging her flashlight, but it flickered out. I gripped the crowbar, my palm's spiral mark bleeding now, the pain sharp. The horror was overwhelming. We were marked, and she was coming to collect. The trapdoor exploded open, and I knew we'd made a deadly mistake coming back here. I pulled Lila toward the broken window, thinking we could jump, but the drop was too high, the ground alive with her glow. The figure was inside now, its shape flickering in the corners. I swung the crowbar, hitting nothing but air, the growl shaking my skull. Lila grabbed the ranger's photo, tearing it, and the air screamed like we'd hurt her. My vision blurred, the spiral mark burning deeper, and I felt her, inside my head, whispering mine. The scary part was how it felt true, like I was already hers. We backed into a corner, the platform shrinking, the glow blinding, her smudged face everywhere. I spotted a trapdoor in the ceiling, leading to the roof. It was a long shot, but I pushed Lila toward it, climbing after her. The ladder snapped halfway, and I barely caught the edge, my arms screaming. On the roof, the forest stretched endless, the glow pulsing below. Lila was sobbing, saying we'd lost Vance because of her Ouija board obsession. I wanted to comfort her, but the growl was louder, the figure climbing now, its limbs bent wrong. The terrifying realization hit. We weren't escaping. We were cornered, and she was closing in, her whispers promising we'd never leave. The roof shook, her glow flooding up, the air thick with that rotting smell. I looked for a way down, but the ladder was gone, the forest a sea of shadows. Lila clutched the crowbar now, her eyes wild, saying we had to fight. I nodded, but my heart wasn't in it. The spiral mark was spreading, my arm numb. The figure appeared, its smudged face inches away, and I felt my mind fraying, like she was unraveling me. The horror was absolute. We'd opened that lockbox, played her game, and now we were hers, trapped on this tower with nowhere left to run. The figure's smudged face loomed on the roof, its glow blinding, the growl a roar in my ears. Lila swung the crowbar, screaming, but it passed through the figure like smoke, her laugh sharp and cruel. My spiral mark burned, spreading up my arm, my vision flickering like a bad TV. The whispers screamed mine, and I felt her inside me, clawing at my thoughts. Lila grabbed my hand, begging to jump, but the drop was suicide, the forest alive with her shadows. My biggest mistake was trusting that key, opening the lockbox, thinking we could outsmart her. The horror was clear. She'd marked us from the start, and we'd played right into her hands. Lila tore at the ranger's photo again, and the figure shrieked, the air splitting. For a moment, I thought we'd hurt her, but the glow intensified, her smudged face multiplying, surrounding us. I pushed Lila toward the trapdoor, hoping to get back inside, but it was sealed shut, like she'd locked us out. My arm was useless now, the spiral mark black, pulsing with her presence. Lila's eyes were wide, her face pale, whispering Vance's name. The terrifying truth hit. Vance was gone because of our choices. My choice to open that box, Lila's to trust the map. We'd led ourselves to this, and she was collecting. I grabbed a loose piece of the roof's railing, swinging it at the figure, but it dissolved, reappearing closer. Lila screamed, her crowbar slipping, and I saw it. Her hand had a spiral mark now, faint but growing. My heart sank. "We're marked," I whispered, my voice breaking. The figure's laugh was deafening, the tower shaking like it might collapse. I tried to pull Lila close, but she slipped, teetering on the edge. I lunged, grabbing her wrist, but her eyes were wrong, cloudy, like hers. The horror was crushing. She was taking Lila, and I couldn't stop it. The glow pulsed faster, the whispers now a chant of our names. Lila's grip weakened, her body going limp. I screamed her name, but she fell, vanishing into the glow below, her scream cut off. I was alone, the figure's smudged face inches from mine, its cold touch burning my skin. My vision darkened, the spiral marks spreading to my chest. I swung the railing, hitting nothing, my strength fading. The terrifying realization hit. I'd led us here, trusted that key, and now Lila and Vance were gone, taken by her. The tower's roof felt like a grave, the forest her kingdom, and I was the last piece of her game. I collapsed, my body heavy, the spiral mark pulsing like a heartbeat. The figure hovered, its smudged face tilting, like it was savoring me. I saw flashes, Vance's scream, Lila's fall, the ranger's blank smile in that photo. My mistake was thinking we could leave, that burning anything or running would save us. The horror was absolute. She didn't just want us dead, she wanted us hers, forever. The glow swallowed the roof, and I felt my mind slipping, her whispers filling it, chanting mine. I tried to crawl, but my body wouldn't move, the spiral mark claiming me. I woke in a hospital, tubes in my arms, my vision blurry. A ranger said they'd found me on the road, half dead, no sign of Lila or Vance. My Jeep was trashed, the lockbox gone, but the brass key was in my pocket, unburned, its spiral mark etched deeper. My arms covered in scars now, spirals that itch at night. The terrifying truth haunts me. I escaped, but I didn't. She's still with me, in my dreams, my reflection, her smudged face behind my eyes. I lock my doors in Cincinnati, but I hear her growl, feel her touch. The tragedy isn't just losing Lila and Vance, it's knowing I'm hers, marked forever. I burned the ranger's log when I got home, but the ashes formed a spiral on my floor. I see her in shadows, hear her whispers in the wind. I tried to tell a cop, but he called it trauma, said I was lucky to survive. Lucky doesn't cut it. The horror lingers. She's not just in Hocking Hills, she's in me, in every dark corner. I've thought about going back, destroying that tower, but I know it's pointless. She's bigger than that, older, and she's waiting for more. The key sits in a drawer, warm to the touch, whispering my name at night. I don't sleep much, afraid of what I'll see. My reflection's wrong. My eyes are cloudy, like hers. The spiral scars spread, faint but growing, and I feel her, clawing inside. The tragedy is, I'll never be free. I've warned friends to avoid Hocking Hills, but they laugh, saying it's just a park. I wish they were right. The horror is knowing others will find that tower, that key, and she'll mark them too, one by one, claiming them as hers. I'm alive, but it's no win. It's a curse, and she's still hungry. I dream of Crow's Hollow every night, the stone circle glowing, her smudged face everywhere. Sometimes I see Lila and Vance, their eyes blank, chanting mine. I wake screaming, the key in my hand, though I swear I locked it away. The terrifying truth is, I brought her with me, and she's never leaving. Hocking Hills was just the start, and she's waiting for the next fool to climb that tower. I'm marked, my life hers, and the tragedy is knowing I'll carry her forever, her whispers my only company in the dark.